Trek Profiles Podcast, Episode 25, recorded June 2019. This is the Trek Profiles Podcast, where each episode we sit down with a Star Trek fan. We learn their story and we try to figure out why Star Trek means so much to them, to us, and to all of you. I'm John, your intrepid host of this whole enterprise, and I welcome you to this, the Trek Profiles Podcast, Episode 25. If you wish to get in touch with us, you can reach us at feedback@trekprofiles.com or on Facebook or Twitter at Trek Profiles. Show notes for this and every episode are posted at trekprofiles.com, where I post all the links and a little more information about each episode and a bit more about our guests. This show is completely independent and relies on your listenership and feedback. If you like what you hear on the podcast and you want to support us, the best way you can do that is to subscribe via your preferred podcasting platform. Spoiler warning, humans. As we record this, we have reached the end of Season 2 of Star Trek Discovery, so all previous Trek content up to and including that point is fair game and may be discussed during this episode. You have been warned, human. As always, my trusty sidekick and co-host is the always vivacious, very valiant, but never vexatious M5 Multitronic unit. Greet our listeners, M5.
M5 ready.
M5, let's see the news and weather.
M5 will comply.
Well, my listeners, as promised previously on the last episode, there are some very lightly edited outtakes at the very end of this episode after all the ending tags and such. My guest and I on this episode were real chatterboxes, and I had to cut quite a bit of Star Trek content out from the main track. But if you want it all, it's all there for you at the end of this episode. Enjoy it. And let's do a little bit of listener feedback. Here is an iTunes review posted by Carl Wonders. He says, quote, "What makes a fandom? This is a terrific podcast that looks at Star Trek through interviews with fans. Why do people become fans? What about this 50-year-old franchise speaks to them? John does a fantastic job hosting a show that feels just like two people sitting down and chatting about something they both love. With discussions ranging from collecting to cosplay to deep dives into philosophy, this show has something for everyone, even with a passing interest in Star Trek. A new must-listen for me." End quote. Well, thank you, Carl, for your generous words. I appreciate that so much. One more piece of listener feedback here. I got an email from Admiral Tony from Portland Sector. Hello, Tony. Or Admiral Tony, I guess. He says that he's fascinated by episode 20 of Trek Profiles that I did with Janae Fowler, but he takes exception with the fact that I referred to the religious organization that she was a member of as a cult. And I just want to say that the Trek Profiles podcast is really about showcasing my guest's point of view on Star Trek. And if that's how my guest wanted to describe them, I'm going to take her word on it. I'm not here to adjudicate claims by the guest that are really far afield from the world of Star Trek. And if I let someone on the show, I'm going to let them have their say, showcase their point of view. That's just how I roll. I appreciate it if you didn't like the term. I understand that some people can take exception to that. I understand it. But that was her point of view. She had her say, and that's just how I roll. But I thank you for your email. And anybody else wants to weigh in on it, feel free to email me or tweet at me. Happy to talk to you about it. All right, let's take a look at Kobayashi Maru feedback from episode 23 with my friend Shashank Avaru. Question 1. Classiest class, Intrepid class or Excelsior class? Shashank chose the Excelsior. Well, it was a hard-fought space battle, my peeps, but the tiny Intrepid class overpowered the Excelsior by 52 to 48%. Question 2. Time for a break. Chocolate treats with Troy or multiple espresso shots with Tilly. My guest wanted the chocolate, and so did all of you. Troy trounced Tilly by a titanic 64 to 36 total. A tectonic triumph for the Betazoid, truly. Question 3. Welcome, time traveler. You can save only one of these ladies from certain death. Will it be Edith Keeler from City on the Edge of Forever or alternative Tasha Yar from Yesterday's Enterprise? Shashank went with Edith Keeler. But Tasha tamed this trial by a tremendous 62 to 38%. A terrific tally for Tasha in this test. Question 4. Time for your workout. Will it be Anbo Jitsu with Riker's dad or Seuss Mana against the Vulcan logic extremist adjunct Vlatak? Both the listeners and Shashank chose Anbo Jitsu. Riker's dad delivered a double-blind backhanded bash to banish Vlatak to the big beyond by an 83 to 17% beating. Question 5. Welcome to Starfleet. Your first assignment is to serve as a personal assistant to a Admiral. Which one would be worse, Dougherty or Jameson? Shashank picked Dougherty, and he dominated this dust-up 64 to 36% in a distinctly domineering development. That's it for the messages and communiques. Let's move on. M5, let's run the intelligence profile for this week's guest, and let's start the show.
M5 working.
Her favorite Starfleet character is Jadzia Dax. Her favorite ship is that one and only flying Roomba, the USS Defiant. And if she could visit any place in the Star Trek universe, the first place she'd go is the NX-01 engine room to hear the purring of that Warp 5 engine. You can find her on the Twitter at EatAtQuarks and also on the amazingly fun Snap Trek podcast. She currently hails from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, in North America, Earth in Sector 001. It's Jen Tifft. Welcome, Jen, and thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me on. This is wonderful. I'm excited to be here with you.
I know, this came together like very suddenly.
Yeah.
You know, because you were just like, I'm waiting for someone to ask me to be on Trek Profiles. I don't remember. There was something on Twitter.
So another dear friend said that they'd like, waiting for the Jen Trek Profiles. And I said, just waiting for the call. I was being flippant about it. But then I got the DM from you and I was very grateful that you took that seriously.
So you've listened to the podcast?
Yes. I'm a big fan of your podcast, yes.
Oh, well, thank you. That's very kind. What have you learned by listening to the Trek Profiles podcast, besides all these idiotic things about myself, which we shall not discuss?
Yeah, you do get a little bit of John in every episode, learn a little bit more about John too, as much as, learn most about the guest, but then a little bit of John in there too, which is nice. But no, what I just love hearing everybody's different story and how all these different people from different walks of life have come to the same fandom as I have. And it's just always really a joy to hear. So
cool.
It's awesome. Yeah.
Cool. So, Jen, the M5 is telling me that it's time for question 1. Are you a Star Trek fan?
Oh, hell yes. I am a Star Trek fan. Very much so.
When did you realize you were a Star Trek fan?
I've been a Star Trek fan pretty much my entire life, as long as I can remember. I'm a child of the 80s, so originally it was just, here or there, there'd be a rerun and syndication of the original series, but I was really young and I liked it, but I didn't, probably a lot of the deeper, meanings of the of the show went a little over my head. But I loved it. To me, it was Kirk and Spock, best friends in space, having space adventures, So that was where I was because I was so young. And then when Next Generation came out, I was very excited, that, it's going to be like this show only with modern modern 80s sensibilities. Great. And so I started watching that from the beginning. And from then on, I was just hooked. That was my big hook was when Next Generation started and I could watch the show from the beginning instead of just catching random episodes here or there. So
as we record this, it's June 2019. Season 2 of Discovery has ended.
Yes.
Have you seen every bit of Star Trek that there is to watch as we sit here and talk?
I have more times than I should probably admit. But yes, I am a completist.
This is the forum to admit these things, Jen.
That's true.
Anybody who signs up for 2 hours of Trek
space.
geekery, I mean, you got to be in it to sign up for this.
True.
You're among friends here, so that's totally fine. That's totally fine. So you're growing up. Baby Jen is watching TNG on TV. And where did you grow up exactly?
I grew up in the Poconos, which is the mountain area in northeastern Pennsylvania, basically.
Right. Okay. So you're watching TNG on some local station up there.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Catching it in syndication.
Yep.
What's the first thing you did in your Star Trek fandom besides watching the episodes on TV? Did you go to a convention? Ooh. Did you buy some merch? Did you dress up for Halloween? How did you first start to branch out after watching episodes?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't think I really branched out besides watching the show until more towards college when I, went to my first convention. And I really enjoyed the conventions, because it was nice to meet like-minded people, Yeah, it wasn't until then. I never read the books or the comics or anything. I've been trying to get more into that now. I remember purposefully not wanting to do that because I didn't want to mix up what I knew. Yeah, I hate to use the word canon, but like what was on the screen versus things I would learn in the books and mix up the characters, But now I'm over that, and now I just want everything.
I know, it's awful. It's awful.
Yeah, but I still don't want to read the Discovery books because I don't want to know any background that isn't in the show until it's over, until we have everything they want to give us on screen, and then I'll go back and flesh it out.
It seems like those Discovery books are pretty well tied in, though.
I know, yeah. But
they give you some insight into some things. Yeah,
but I don't want that. I just want to enjoy what they're giving me on the screen, like with just the clues they give me. They give what a more casual viewer would see, and try to, and then go back and get that richer detail.
Gotcha.
Just for me, that's just
sense.
That's just how it works.
I appreciate it, Jen, because as we record this, Game of Thrones has just ended.
Yes,
and I was working for the cable company actually here in Las Vegas before Game of Thrones went on the air. And HBO and all the premium channels, they always come into the office, the sales reps for the premium channels, and they'll do these basically these little presentations on, hey, we have this new show coming, and you should sell it and get people to buy HBO because it's going to be awesome.
Right.
And I remembered seeing like all the signs up about Game of Thrones, and I remember thinking, I think that's based on a book. And I was going on a vacation, and this is before the show even went on the air. This is just when it was, going to be on in like 3 months. And so I went and I bought the first book on Kindle, and I read it straight through, and I ended up reading all the books before. And the problem was, like, people would ask me questions, and I couldn't keep straight in my head what was a book thing versus a TV thing.
Right. Yes.
And I would say, oh, well, there's this other character. And then they're like, who? And I was like, oh, God, wait a minute. And then where's this other character? Is he still rowing the boat, or is he doing this other thing? And it was a mess. It was just a complete mess. And I almost wish I had seen I wish I had done what you're doing and just watched the show and then gone back and read the books, because I think it would have been a better experience for me. So no faulting on that one. So where was that first convention that you went to?
Oh, outside Philadelphia. Yeah. It was actually, my first one was actually a really big one because Avery Brooks was there.
Oh, nice.
So a way to jump into it, with my favorite captain and, right off the bat. So that was a really exciting, I think my first convention was also my most exciting convention for me. He was great.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
He sang some, The Best Is Yet to Come, and it was amazing. And he signed my baseball, and
he's a very strange guy. I mean, very unique individual, right?
Oh, he's a unique gem.
Yes. I saw Avery, I want to say, at Star Trek Las Vegas in 2011, 2010, something like that. It was one year they had all the captains. So they had,
nice.
They had a special panel that had Scott Bakula, Kate Mulgrew, and His Royal Shatness, and they got them all on stage at once, and it was almost like overload, too much. It was my nerd brain couldn't handle it.
Oh man,
yeah,
that's wonderful.
Yeah, and then he had his own panel he was doing when he was up there, and all of a sudden, Sirach just comes out and like crashes his panel. And so they had a moment. It was really, really something else. So I feel really lucky as a fan to say I've seen him, because he doesn't do anything anymore.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I feel lucky about that too. What's
the last convention you went to?
Well, it's funny. I had like a 15-year gap between conventions. I just stopped going. It just, other things in life came up, and, and it just, I just stopped doing it. But then I just recently, just a couple months ago, went to Philly Comic-Con. And it wasn't, it wasn't a Star Trek specific convention, but it was good to be back. I think I have the convention bug again.
Yeah, well, you can get your nerd on. It's all right.
Yeah.
You're around people who are going to be okay, and you can wear your cosplay and all that stuff.
Yeah, right.
So what was the high point, the Trek high point of that convention for you?
Honestly, the non-celebrity high point actually was getting to meet a good friend from Twitter face to face. Finally, our mutual friend Thad Haight was there too, and it was really great to get to finally hang out with him in person And he's as great a guy in person as he is on Twitter. So that was the highlight for me.
Well, it's a common story I hear is, people start going to conventions because they want to see the celebrities. They want to see, these kinds of people. And then after a while, they're like, yeah, I've seen all those guys. Now it's all about, I want to see my friends and, all my Twitter compatriots and all these other people that I meet online and in the different groups and whatever. So yeah, that's very, very normal. It's very common. Did you wear a costume?
Oh, you know what? I actually didn't, because I met Kwan Young. Is that how you pronounce his name? Kwan Young. But he played Buck Buckeye. So I wore my Buck Buckeye jersey. Yes, I have a Buck Buckeye jersey. I guess is a costume. Now that I think about it.
It is. But, yeah. That's totally legit.
Yeah. So I got him. That was my celebrity highlight. Was I got him to sign. I actually had the brilliant artist Lee Sargent make up a Buck Buckeye baseball card, and I had him sign it. So I love that. That's sitting next to my Cisco baseball I mentioned now.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's
get a theme going.
Yeah. So why
that was delightful.
Is he one? He's one of your favorites from the show?
Besides Trek, I'm a big sports fan too. So I always like when sports and Trek intersect, and I just love the continuing theme of baseball running through Deep Space Nine, and the fact that Cisco has this favorite player who at that point didn't exist yet, but it was the greatest of all time, according to him. And I like that whole idea.
The London Kings.
The London Kings, exactly. Go Kings.
Can't believe I remembered that.
That's pretty good. I'm impressed. The London Kings. Oh, that's funny. Yeah. So I just think it's fun.
So you're going to continue to go to conventions?
Yeah. I think I would love to do some more of that. It's a little more challenging now with children, trying to plan traveling for those sort of things. But at least the ones around me.
If I didn't live in Las Vegas, I don't think I'd go to STLV. I don't think I could swing it.
Right. I've never been, and I would love to go to STLV someday. So
it is definitely a trip.
Yeah.
It is definitely a trip. Yeah. And it's, and I've talked about this, and I'm sure you have heard that it's a little bit different from the Comic-Con experience in that, everyone gets a seat and you don't always have to line up for everything for like getting in the main theater or the secondary theater. So that makes it a little bit nicer. So yeah, it's not bad. Okay. So when you are watching Star Trek, and I'm specifically referring to the most recent incarnations, Discovery, and when the Picard show comes out and all of that, are you watching it with a group? Do you watch it on your own? How do you consume it?
Well, new Trek, Discovery and Picard and everything I watch with my husband because he's into it too, but in a more normal person kind of way, He's not as obsessed with it as I am, but he likes Discovery and he'll definitely want to watch Picard with me. But that's the one show that, how you like save shows for people, like you can't watch this new episode until you're with that person. So we have some shows like that, but for Discovery, for anything Star Trek related, he knows that like I'm watching it as soon as it comes out, like I'll watch it again with you when you're ready. But if you're not there when it comes on, you're just gonna, I'm still going to watch it. I'm not saving it for you because I can't wait. But when I watch the older shows, I like to put on random episodes when I'm on the treadmill or folding laundry or something like that. So I end up watching a lot of Trek, while I'm doing chores like that.
Oh, I talked about this, I think, on an episode that hasn't come out yet, but I guess when people hear this, they may have already heard this story, but I'm doing that Voyager rewatch or watch through because I haven't seen all of Voyager yet. And I would tell people if I'm live tweeting Voyager and it's early in the morning Pacific time, I am usually on the elliptical trainer at the gym.
Yes.
and I'm one-handed watching the show and like flipping over to TrekCore, grabbing a screenshot, and then like flipping over to Twitter. It will take me like, a 45-minute episode. I'll get maybe 15 minutes at a time for a maybe 35, 40-minute workout, and it's all like one-handed. But I fool myself.
That's multitasking.
I'm working on my core because I'm holding the thing with one hand and I'm not falling off the elliptical, So it's these lies we tell ourselves that make our lives seem bearable. What can I tell you?
Oh man, I can't do that. I tried to tweet when I was on the treadmill once and I just couldn't do it. I'm like, I'm going to stumble and fall. I can't multitask like that, I guess.
I couldn't do it on a treadmill.
Yeah.
So when you're watching Discovery in particular, or even Star Trek, when you're watching other episodes, do you watch it on like a small device, like a phone or a tablet, or are you watching it on a big screen, or all of the above?
Yeah, I mean, big screen usually. If I'm doing a chore where I'm going around the house, I'll put one on, my phone and just take my phone with me so I can have Trek in the background. But most of the time, I just cast it to the big TV.
Do you pick the old episodes at random, or do you go for a theme?
Well, I always have a show that I'm doing a rewatch of. If I'm not feeling like that, I'll pick just whatever episode I'm feeling, take breaks from the rewatch and do other series. Or sometimes, it's just whatever I have to watch for podcasting homework and that sort of thing.
Oh, I know all about that.
Oh, yeah. I gave you a lot of podcast homework for this one. I got to give you the homework.
But as I told you in my message, right, you seem to think that having all these Star Trek episodes to watch is a problem, right? I sit here and do Star Trek podcast, not a problem, Yes, sir, man. Please have another.
More Trek, the better. Exactly.
Yeah, it's all good. It's all good.
Wrong.
Yeah, although I will say that you did cause me some stress, and we'll get into this later because you picked a lot of episodes that I had not seen or had no recollection of. So I was like, oh man, I'm totally breaking the, my Voyager watch through here, but that's all right.
I felt bad when I picked the Voyager episodes. I did, because I knew you're doing your first watch through. I didn't know how many of them I had.
I'm in the middle of season 5. Yeah, I'm in the middle of season 5 right now. But where are you? You said you're always doing a rewatch. So where are you? Okay. And what are you currently watching?
I just finished my TOS rewatch. Was my last thing. And I was debating whether or not to do a DS9 or a Next Gen rewatch next. And then the Deep Space Nine documentary came out. And I said, oh yeah, I'm definitely doing Deep Space Nine next. And then the trailer for the Picard show came out. And I'm like, oh yeah, I'm definitely doing Next Generation next. Definitely. So I haven't picked one yet. I'll have to think about that in the coming days. I'm leaning more towards Next Gen now, just because it's more relevant now to the fall, and maybe I can catch my husband or some other family members would want to watch some of those too to refresh their memory. So I'll probably do that.
Did you have a chance to go to one of the live screenings?
I did. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was kind of neat being in a theater with people that you knew were pretty hardcore fans,
Yeah, no one's going to be like, oh, I guess I'll go to the theater and, oh, look at this. Here's some weird, Star Trek thing. That's not going to happen. Yeah, I mean, there might have been one or two weirdos that did that, but that would not be normal.
Maybe documentary fans in general or TV fans, but yeah, not too many of them. Yeah, because it's different. It's fun seeing the Trek movies in general. It's always a fun experience, but this was a little bit different because this was a little bit more of a deeper cut, So it was a good time, and it was a great documentary too. So Deep Space Nine is my favorite series, so I really enjoyed that a lot.
Were you one of the backers of the project?
I was, yeah. So I was lucky enough to watch it twice because I watched it when the backers stream came out. I tried to wait. I tried to resist and not watch it so I could see it live, in the theater for the first time. But I'm glad I didn't have the willpower for that because it was still brilliant, seeing it both ways. So.
Yeah, I had a different experience. I started watching the backer stream and I got maybe 30 minutes into it and I thought, I love this, but I think I just want to watch it with everybody. I don't know why. I just felt like I didn't.
I can see that.
I don't know. I just kind of turned it off and I was like, I want to watch it, because I knew I was going with a group, here in town and we were just going to sit there and nerd out and have a great time. So we thoroughly enjoyed it. So good. Do you collect anything?
I don't collect anything in particular. I'm not a big fan of a lot of clutter. You know what I mean? So if I keep something, it's because it's very personal or meaningful to me. So I have some pieces that I really like, but I don't have anything that I have to get like every issue of or anything like that. Yeah. So
what are like your favorite items?
Well, I already mentioned my my Cisco baseball is my favorite thing that I own. I would probably save that in a fire. You know?
Is it sitting on a little on a little pedestal on your desk?
It is, yes. It's in one of those cases.
Very appropriate. Very appropriate.
Yeah. But honestly, my favorite thing is my copy of the Deep Space Nine Companion. It's such a special book to me. It's so well done, and I love it. It's like my Bible. So what I did with that is I decided that that's where I would get all my signatures from. So when I went to conventions, back in the day, I would just have them sign on their picture in the Deep Space Nine Companion. So that's pretty filled with a lot of great signatures. So I think that might be my favorite thing.
How complete are you with the signatures?
I have all the main cast except Terry Farrell and a lot of the supporting characters too. I have all the Ferengi and Garrick and Rom and Jeffrey Combs but of the main cast, I'm missing Terry Farrell. It's really bothering me because she's my favorite character in all of Trek.
And well, she's around. I mean, she does events and stuff still, so you'll get her if you keep going to conventions. You'll meet up with her somewhere, right?
But I have all the main cast except like I said, Avery. I only saw that one time, and he signed my baseball, so he's not in the companion. But I'm glad I had him do the baseball instead of the book.
Yeah, because if you didn't get it, you'd be out of luck, right? Yeah, you'd be totally out of luck. So you do a Star Trek podcast. You do the wonderful Snap Trek podcast with Ross, and it's great and a lot of fun.
Thank you.
What induced you to decide to do a Star Trek podcast?
Well, I started listening to a bunch of Star Trek podcasts. I think I got on Twitter and got involved with with Star Trek Twitter, which is great. And then from that, it led to listening to a bunch of podcasts. And I thought, these are really interesting to listen to. And I feel like I could add to the conversations. So I said, I'd like to try that. It sounds like something I'd like to try. And I did. And and it's been a lot of fun for me.
Oh, it's great. It's great. I mean, what I want to understand though is, especially for people who don't do this, and since you are a podcaster, they don't understand how much work goes into this. I mean, between like setting up the recordings and editing and doing all the social medias and just doing all the ephemeral stuff you got to do to get the doggone thing produced and out. It's a lot of work. What does that do for you? Yeah,
I mean, the editing, man, that's not that's not the best time.
It's a bag of hurt.
Woo, yeah. But yeah, I don't know. I don't mind the extra stuff. It's just the fun part is the actual recording is enough of a adrenaline rush that I don't mind doing the other stuff, I guess. But yeah, I think the editing is probably just the the worst thing. I don't mind the prep ahead of recording or anything, but the editing, man, woo.
I know. You watch a few episodes and then you get in there and you prepare a script if you do that sort of thing, and you do the recording. It's all great. Right. And then you got gigabytes of audio sitting there, and you bring it up in your audio editor. And I know what I do. I just sit there and I kind of look at it. I'm just like, it's just, there it all is. All right, let's go.
Here we go.
Oh, God. It's funny because I had someone that I think you would know. I'm not going to say who it is, but someone that's really active in Star Trek Twitter. And they contacted me and said, hey, here's this non-Star Trek thing that I think we should do a podcast on. It'd be really fun. And I said, I agree with you. It'd be really fun. We can talk about it some more. I am never going to edit a single freaking thing. Right. So just if you want to ask me to do a thing, I'll do a thing. But there will be no more editing because I cannot handle it. It's just it's so, oh God, I almost,
I hear it. I hear ya.
So I'm jealous of those monetized podcasts where they can like pay somebody to do it.
Right.
That's not how we roll.
Yeah, this
up
is just
in here.
Fun.
So I think we should start talking about some episodes, and I think I want to start with some Voyager. So we'll skip around, I think, but I want to start maybe with a series opener. So let's talk about Caretaker.
Caretaker.
Yeah, season 1, episode 1 of Voyager. And the M5 says that we should talk about this episode. So I guess I want to know from you, is this an episode that you find personally meaningful, or do you just think it's a really awesome example of Star Trek, or both?
This one's personal to me. Caretaker came out when I was in high school. And I was really, really excited that there was going to be a female captain. You know, when I found that out, I was really excited there's going to be a captain that looks like me. And so I was talking about it with the other nerd kids, in my school. And I got a lot of the responses like, oh, that's stupid. A girl can't be a captain, a lot of those kinds. And I remember this is my, kind of like my first experience with that sort of attitude. And I was really surprised by that. Especially since I was talking to nerdy Star Trek kids, you know what I mean?
Right.
There were kids that I would have assumed would have been allies, Now I know, that's not necessarily the truth in the world. But Caretaker, the Caretaker premiere was actually a big thing for me because I'm mad at myself that I let them ruin it for me. What I mean? Because
you felt that it affected how you viewed the episode?
Yeah, because I remember taking that to heart and thinking in my head, oh no, now this captain has to be not only just be a cool captain, she has to be like the greatest captain of all time to show them. You know what I mean? So I'm watching Caretaker, with holding my breath, hoping that she was the greatest captain of all time, instead of just telling them to, F off and, not even let them bother me, which is what I would do now. But, and it's interesting because this is kind of an attitude I've had to learn to outgrow, because I've been in a male dominated field, an engineer. And,
what kind of engineer?
My undergrad is electrical engineering and my master's is in fire protection engineering. But I've been a safety inspector for nuclear power plants, a federal safety inspector. So,
oh, nice.
So we might have a little something in common. I know you spent some time on a
nuclear submarine.
Yeah,
on the nuclear vessels.
So maybe we could geek out about that later, off air or whatever. But yes, but I took that to heart, and I always kept that with me, that to be taken seriously in a male-dominated field, you can't just be competent. You have to be the best to even be, equated, just to be afforded the same level of respect that your male colleagues get just as a baseline. I couldn't just pass the class. I had to get an A. I think I shouldn't have let them bother me, but I did. And then I owe Captain Janeway an apology, I feel, because I watched Caretaker and oh man, the first time you see her, it's glorious. You see her, she's got her patented Janeway hands on hips. She's looking down at Paris. You see her, you're like at Paris's level, and she's higher up, and she's wonderful and authoritative and beautiful and awesome. And then at the end, when they get stranded in the Delta Quadrant, I thought to myself, oh, great. They're in this predicament because of a mistake the female captain made. Great. They just proved these guys right. And I was really, really upset about that the first time I saw it. It took me a while to warm up to Janeway and to realize that she actually didn't make a mistake. She made a decision. I didn't frame it that way when I was a teenager first seeing it, but she didn't make a mistake. She made that decision knowing full well that destroying that array was going to strand them in the Delta Quadrant. She knew those things going in, and she did it anyway. You can agree or disagree with the decision she made, but that's different than making a mistake. And I don't think I gave her that benefit of the doubt because I let them rattle me. So that was just a big moment of realization in my life.
Did you find yourself being sort of that combative fan where it's like, no, you all have to agree with me that it's this way and Janeway is the best? Even if there's an episode that isn't so great for her, you're going to be like, no, it was the best. Because I had that feeling for certain times in my life in fandom.
You mean like feeling like I had to like have her back kind of?
Yeah, you had to defend her to other people.
Had to defend her? Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I ever felt like I had to defend her as much as it was more like after this, I was able to know who was worth my time. Mm. You know what I mean? Because it's like, oh, you guys just basically told on yourself that you don't think I'm competent. If you don't think a woman can be captain, then what do you think of me? There's a difference between arguing about an episode, which I love doing. I love having the debates about what was right and what was wrong, and just being negative, like saying, oh, I hate all this. This is all stupid. Janeway should be court-martialed for not following the Prime Directive, which is something that people have told me.
Well, then every captain should be court-martialed for not following the Prime suggestion. I mean,
exactly. There's examples of that for every captain, but the only one that anyone has ever told me that about has been Janeway.
I had the least experience with Voyager of any of the series when I was going into it. So I know that, I knew that there were certain things, like I was supposed to hate Neelix because everybody hates Neelix, apparently. Everybody's supposed to hate Kes, apparently. And I had no opinion on it. It's just these are things I'd heard.
Right.
And I didn't have an opinion about Janeway one way or the other, so I wasn't, quote unquote, told how I was supposed to think about that. But my opinion is that she's pretty freaking awesome. She is probably the captain who is most interested in making sure that the crew is functioning well.
Yes.
Picard kept himself aloof by design. He never wanted to be in with the crew. He wanted to be kept 7 steps above. It was only in the very final episode where he joins a card game that was considered like a major breakthrough.
Right.
Whereas I see Janeway constantly asking at various points in various episodes, how's the crew doing, and demonstrating real leadership, which is not always easy to do. So I'm a big admirer. I thought she's a great character and a great addition to the Pantheon. And I admit, and I'll be curious to see what you think about this, but I see in the fandom all these people gushing over some of the great ladies in Discovery. And while I take nothing away from them, I think Janeway was there, man. She was there. She was blazing this trail in the 90s. Yeah. I don't get it. So I tend to get it gets my hackles up when people are like, oh, this is the first time that like, this is not the first anything,
Right.
We had that, and it was great. Yeah. And that's not to say it can't be great again, but it's great now. And it was great then.
Yeah. I mean, they're adding on to it and changing it in ways that are wonderful to see. But yeah, Janeway was a great character because she wasn't just female. Like, you know what I mean? Like, her womanhood didn't define her in any way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was a both and.
It was just a thing about her,
Yeah,
which I appreciate it.
She had red hair and she was captain.
Right. Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Kirk had brown hair and he was captain.
Yeah. Yeah. And she is so decisive. She makes a lot of decisions you could agree or disagree with, but when she makes a decision, she does it and she goes full in, knowing the consequences of everything she does. And sometimes she has hard decisions to make and she makes them, like caretaker. I think post caretaker. Tuvix, yes.
Where she makes the wrong decision.
Well, do you want to talk about Tuvix? Because I have opinions about Tuvix.
we can if you want. I mean, it's not on the list. We can talk about it if you want.
I mean, I have opinions about Tuvix. I don't necessarily think she made the wrong decision here, but let me explain, because I know you disagree about this. First of all, I think this is a decision that only post-caretaker Janeway could have made. She made the decision that stranded them in the Delta Quadrant, and then from there on in, her only goal was protecting her crew. So, but the Tuvix dilemma is interesting. I a firm believer in bodily autonomy. So I have to acknowledge the fact that Tuvix has bodily autonomy. And if he does, he has every right to say no to this procedure. So yeah, Janeway straight up murdered Tuvix.
Thank you.
She did. She totally straight up murdered Tuvix. She murdered Tuvix to save 2 members of her crew. And the problem I have with the Tuvix debate is if Tuvix was holding Tuvok and Neelix prisoner in a jail cell instead of his DNA, and Janeway killed him to get to them, I don't think we'd be having this discussion.
You have to keep it in mind that at the same time that the Tuvix episode is airing, I think it's towards the end of season 2, one of the bad guys we're running across consistently is the Vidians. Mm-hmm. And the Vidians are harvesting organs from living creatures and using those organs to save many of their own species. So if you are allowed as a rule, right, and here's what I'm thinking of, this might be just way too much, but there's in the world of ethics, there's an approach called Deontology, which basically is like rule-based ethics. So if you say like it's wrong to lie, then that means it is always wrong to lie. And, Kant, who's one of the big proponents of this, he says, like, if you say it's wrong to lie, then if you're at your house, and this is actually in the writings, you would study this in philosophy in school. I don't know if you took any of that or not, but if someone comes and knocks on your door and says, there's a madman who's chasing me, who wants to kill me, you have to hide me. And he runs inside your house and hides in the closet, right? And you don't even have, it happens so fast, you don't even have anything to say about it. And then you turn around and then there's the madman. And he says, have you seen this person? If you believe that to lie is wrong, you should not lie. And you should say, yes, he's right over there in the closet, right? Because that's what it means to believe in rules. And so if to kill one person to save many makes the Vidians criminal, then murdering Tuvix is criminal. Then what the Vidians are doing nothing wrong. If killing Tuvix to save Tuvok and Neelix is okay, then the Vidians are total heroes and they should totally go out and harvest organs from tons of innocent people because they're saving more people by doing that.
I don't think that Janeway's a hero for killing Tuvix. I think she made the decision that her becoming a murderer was worth it to save her 2 crew members that she cared about. I don't think, according to whatever your morals or ethics are, that might have been an incorrect decision, but it's a very human decision to make. Because I've thought about the Tuvix debate, because I'd like to sit here on my moral high horse and say, oh, I would never have done that. And that's easy when we're just talking about it as a thought experiment. But then if I think about if one of my children was being held captive inside Tuvix, I'd put that hypo spray in his neck. Does that make me a bad person? But I would do that to save my child. You know what I mean? So it might be the wrong decision, but I also think that it's a very understandable decision, I guess.
So it sounds like we agree that the decision is ethically incorrect.
Right. She definitely murdered somebody.
Then I'm okay. Then I'm all right as long as we just call it what it is. Right.
But again, I mean, it's kind of, if Tuvix was holding them in a jail cell and she shot him with a phaser and killed him, would that be any better? Or is that the same level of murder? How murder-ish is that compared to what she did to Tuvix,
I don't know the answer. Something you can talk about. I think that there is, there's a difference between people in a war, and there's difference between when you're engaged in trying to liberate someone from a jail cell. I think that the context matters, right? Context is for kings. It's a lesson we learned from Discovery, right? And you mentioned earlier about working in nuclear power plants, right? And that's what I did when I was on a submarine. Mm-hmm. And my submarine had tremendous power. We carried tactical nuclear weapons. We could have delivered incredible death and devastation, right? But I worked in the engine room. I never touched a weapons panel in my entire career. But one of the questions would be, if you're on the ship and the ship does this thing, are you responsible for the thing?
Right.
If you're on one of the SLBM type submarines and you got a launch order, you pressing that button is killing millions of people. Right. Under what context is that right? And you may not even know the context, right? Because you're on a submarine. You're not reading the papers. You're not looking at Twitter. You don't know what's going on in the world. You just got a launch package, a target. It's authentic. You launch, and so you don't even get to know the context, nor should you. And they don't want you to know in that case. So there's lots of context that goes into these things that you have to think about. And as long as we agree that it was murder, I think I'm all right with it.
I agree it was murder. That should be a standard question. Where do you stand on the Tuvix issue?
Well, I will admit it was the first time that Janeway came down a peg, because she was on she got nothing but even better every episode, in my opinion. And I was like, I think she's my second favorite captain. Right up going into that episode. And then I was like, oh, no, this is no good. This is no good. And so I kind of, hold that one against her a little bit. But I still respect her tremendously. And I think she's A+.
I kind of think it was a very mama bear thing to do. Like I said, she's protecting her. It's a hard call to make, but she did it herself. I'm glad from dramatic purposes, I'm glad that they made that decision instead of having like a cop out. Cause you knew Tuvok and Neelix were coming back.
Yeah.
Cause it's very similar to Similitude from Enterprise, with Trip's clone, and Archer makes the opposite decision. He says, well, I can't force you to kill yourself to save Trip. And then the cop out there is then Similitude makes the decision on his own. And would Tuvix have ever made that decision on his own? I guess we don't, we'll never know. I doubt it based on his personality.
But there's a long and glorious history of that in Star Trek. And I think one of the great things that I really appreciate about the show is that they'll take the same issue and kind of examine it from other sides.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I did an episode.
That's the whole theme of my podcast, Snaptrack. 2 episodes with a similar theme, and let's explore how they handled it differently. Yeah, I love that. One of the greatest things about Trek.
You said you've listened to all my episodes. Do you remember the one I did with Tim Sandifer? We talked about Return of the Archons and the Apple.
I remember that episode. I don't remember the specific conversation.
Both episodes have the exact same premise.
Right.
Which is that the Enterprise goes to a planet and the planet is in like an unfree state being controlled by a higher intelligence, by basically a supercomputer. And in both episodes, Kirk is like, nope, we've got to stop this. This is no bueno, right?
Yeah.
But in one episode, in Return of the Archons, Spock is like, yep, absolutely. We have got to do this. And in the Apple, Spock is like, no, these people are totally happy here. Val's taking care of them. Leave them alone. They're totally awesome like this. And like Spock, for no reason that you can determine in the episode, has different reactions to the exact same scenario, which is weird. But it's a really interesting contrast because both episodes are pretty much the same.
Right.
Except for that one difference, And so
that's
it's
funny.
Yeah, and I think that's great.
I call that SVU syndrome. Because that's another show that I like, but they have the habit of when they need someone to play devil's advocate, just picking a random character, even if that character would never believe the stuff that they're saying, just so they could show the other side of whatever issue they're talking about. They do that a lot in SVO.
Oh God, I hate that.
Yes, it's so frustrating. It's like, be consistent with your characters, please.
So let's change gears. Let's move from Voyager. Let's talk about some Deep Space Nine since you love it so much.
Yeah.
Let's jump to, maybe we'll do a twofer. Let's talk about In the Hands of the Prophets, and we're going to follow that up with Take Me Out to the Holosuite. Or if you want to talk about Take Me Out to the Holosuite first, we can do that. I'll leave the choice to you. Which one would you like to talk about first?
Okay. Let's maybe go with the heavier one, and then we can move on to having fun in the holodeck, in the holosuite.
All right. So In the Hands of the Prophets, Deep Space Nine, Season 1, Episode 20. This is the one where Keiko gets in trouble with the Bajoran spiritual authorities for her school curriculum. So is this an episode that speaks to you personally, or is this something that you want to hold up as the best of all Star Trek, or a little of both?
I guess a little of both. It's one of the best episodes to me because it just speaks to something like an issue that I really am personally feel strongly about, I guess.
And what is that?
Kai Wynn trying to force her beliefs on everybody, first of all, and then also being disingenuous about why she wants to enforce her beliefs on everyone. And this is something that is very, very apt in a lot of the issues in current day, that we deal with today. So it's really, I think it's really just explored in a really interesting way.
So you're tying In the Hands of the Prophets to modern day?
Yeah.
So give me an example and maybe we can talk about it.
I don't think it's just anti-doctrine, which it is, and I appreciate them going there. I love Keiko's response to Kai Wynn trying to come in and dictate what she teaches in her class. But I think in general, it speaks to people with an agenda exploiting an issue and people who might actually believe in an issue just for their own political benefit. Because Kai Wynn does not give a crap whether or not, the children actually get taught about the prophets in Keiko O'Brien's little classroom. She's not genuine. She's not, arguing in good faith,
Oh, I'd agree with that.
And I mean, which is obvious by the end of the episode, but she's exploiting the other Bajorans' faith and, riling up all this anger and hatred just because it's politically beneficial to her. And that is so, so apt for what's going on in today's political environment.
So in the interest of giving you something to respond to, not trying to just raise the temperature here, but just trying to really get to the truth of it for you, let me hit you up with an alternative take.
Okay.
The Federation comes in, takes over the space station, right, at the invitation of the Bajorans, and they take a lot of the local children and begin indoctrinating them in foreign beliefs. It is cultural imperialism, and it is not respecting the local indigenous beliefs of a local population which has already been battered by foreign powers from elsewhere. This is not respectful of the local people and their traditions and customs. And so there's a case there to be made for that. How would you respond to that?
They're not teaching any beliefs at all. They're teaching science and history and Cisco says they're not saying that you can't have spiritual teachings on Deep Space Nine. Cisco even says there's room. My philosophy is that there's room for all philosophies on the station. No one's telling Kai Wynn that she can't teach the Bajoran children about the prophets, and Keiko teaching them the scientific aspects of the wormhole isn't threatening that in any way. Vedic Wynn, I guess, at this point.
Yep, Vedic Wynn. Yep.
She feels, she's feeling like she's oppressed, but no, Keiko O'Brien isn't saying that what the Bajorans believe is wrong. She's just teaching the science. You know what I mean? Like,
no, I do. But I want to, it's my job to try to get to the truth of something. And so I'm going to hit you with these things.
Absolutely.
Because that's why I watch the episodes, is so that I can, I have to take the opposing viewpoint because it's only the two of us.
And I think that's part of the point too, because this was a station that didn't have a school at all. So I guess you have to assume that all these children were being homeschooled. Or computers, on computers, before Keiko's class, came in. So there's no reason that schooling aspects for those things couldn't continue. This is more like supplemental, I get, you know what I mean? And she's not.
So if I can, take this in a different.
The existence of Verteron particles, or whatever it is, doesn't negate the prophets in any way.
The only thing I know about Verteron particles is whenever you utter the phrase Verteron particles, the very next sentence has to include the phrase deflector dish.
No.
In 100% of Star Trek episodes. So I want to ask you about a different aspect of this episode. Before I ask you this, I want to approach this very delicately, Jen. You mentioned that you have a husband, so you're a wife.
Mm-hmm.
You are a mom.
Yes.
What is your opinion over TNG and Deep Space Nine of the portrayal of Keiko? Because she's a big part of this episode, and certainly it's a bright spot for her in many ways. But what is your thought on how Keiko is portrayed?
Yay, I love Keiko. I'm a big fan of Keiko O'Brien, and I don't see anything on screen that can justify some of the vitriol I've seen some fans and how they relate to Keiko O'Brien. She's a badass botanist. She's got a great career. She's a wonderful mother, a wonderful wife. I understand not liking the dynamic between her and Miles. I don't care for it either. I actually find them uncomfortable to watch a lot of times.
Oh, it's cringy beyond belief.
It's cringy and it's really hard to watch. But I never see anyone criticizing Miles for that relationship, only Keiko. And gee, I wonder why that is, because she's the nagging wife. Is that, why does she take all the heat for their dynamic is what I don't understand.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah. And there's things like I've heard people say like bad things about her because she went to Bajor and, and took Molly to Bajor.
Halt, right. Wait, stop main energizers. We got to talk about this.
Yes.
Because I put that on Miles. That is not on Keiko.
Well, yeah.
Because if your spouse comes to you, and I don't care gender roles here, if your spouse comes to you and says, I really need to do X, and I think that for my life, and I'm thinking about you and our family, I think I need to relocate to region Y, then the question is, well, Miles, why can't you go with her?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
That was not even given the proper weight within the episode.
Thank you. That was the point I was going to make.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to steal it from you.
No, I'm delighted.
Because I'm a dad, and I was like, being away from my kid is not being a good dad, right? And while I get that there's reasons for parents to not be around their kids for various reasons, right? If you're never around your kid, the opportunities for parenting are zero. And if you're around your kid 100% of the time, it is some percentage number, and there is a correlation in between. And if you send your kid away from you, that's not so great,
Right.
and it just bugged the hell out of me.
Well, yeah. And I mean, I have to think that in the 24th century, they hollow talk, on the holophone or whatever all the time and visit Bajor, and everything. But Keiko followed O'Brien to Deep Space Nine. And then maybe it was his turn to follow Keiko to Bajor.
Yes.
But if for whatever reason, he felt like he had to stay on Deep Space Nine and she felt she had to go to Bajor. I get that. But then why do I only hear people judging Keiko for that? I've heard a lot of people say that Keiko, took Molly away from Miles, but I never hear what you mentioned, which is, well, maybe why didn't Miles go with her? And it's just very frustrating that Keiko is the one who gets all the heat for everything in their relationship. And it's really, really frustrating. And especially, and like you said, this episode is like the Keiko episode. She stands up to win right to her face and tells her off like hardly anyone else on Deep Space Nine ever does. And she has no fear. I mean, in this episode, her school gets bombed and she still holds class in the cargo bay. You know what I mean? And she doesn't run away from that fight. And she's such a cool person. I really love Keiko.
Everything that's wrong with the Keiko and Miles relationship is summed up in that one scene in, I think it was a TNG episode.
Yes.
I don't remember which one. We were eating breakfast. Yeah. And it's like, how do you get to the point of marrying somebody and not even know what they eat?
Right.
I mean, but
so bad.
As I was watching that episode, and I was watching it just recently, I think for the podcast for another guest, and I was thinking to myself, this scene was clearly written by a bunch of dudes who were in their 20s who had never been in a serious relationship ever in their life.
I got the same impression. Yeah.
Very clear. I eat all kinds of things that I do not like, and it's just normal. That is how we roll up in here, yo. This is part of being a married person.
Man, you know what? They have a replicator. Why can't they all just eat whatever they want for dinner, too?
I don't know. It's just like your mom actually cooked food. How do you marry someone and not know about that?
Yeah. It's so bad.
It was mind-boggling. So anyway, no, go ahead.
But I could talk about Keiko forever. So just one more Keiko story is...
Sure, go for it.
Well, then I promise I'll stop. But I just love her.
This is the Trek Profiles podcast. We don't stop. Hip-hop, awesome. You don't stop. Star Trek, you don't stop.
You could also just cut me out, which is what the beauty of editing. We talked about the bad things about editing.
All this is staying in. All of it.
The whole Keiko rant.
All of it.
But I adore Keiko, the way she reacted when that accident happened where they had to transfer Kira Yoshi into Major Kara.
Mm-hmm.
And the way she reacted to that horribly, traumatizing event, and the way she fought for Kara's rights in every way, especially the episode where he's finally born, where Yoshi is born, and she kicks Miles and Bareil out of the room. She's the one who's respecting and protecting Kara's rights in the midst of this this traumatizing event, and to make it easier on her. And I love the way that those two women interacted through that whole storyline. And yeah, that was
all right. Well, then I have to bring up another Keiko and Miles story.
Let's just keep going.
We're not going to stop. No. I'm going to make that my theme song. Star Trek, you don't stop. Hip hop, right. You don't stop. So, what was your opinion? I think the episode was Time's Orphan. It's the one where they find their grown up kid on Deep Space Nine. I got to say, I had a really hard time with that episode.
That episode's really hard for me to watch now as a parent. Go ahead.
Okay, so it's another example of this is an episode clearly written by 20-year-old dudes who have not been in a relationship and are not parents, right? I mean, are we like in sync on that?
Oh man, yeah.
Okay, and I don't think we need to say anymore.
Yeah, that one's really like honestly, I really have a hard time watching that episode. It's really traumatizing to me.
I wanted to put my fist through the screen. I couldn't take it.
Okay.
I was like, I hate all of you people, every one of you, all of you.
This whole yeah.
Star Trek has never done families well, ever.
Which is interesting. Well, except for, Ben and Jake. The Ben and Jake relationship is amazing.
You can say that. I have a different perspective.
Oh, really? No, I must hear this.
Okay. So I give a big long rant on the episode I did, I think, with Dan Davidson on The Visitor.
I remember the Visitor rant.
Right, yes, because as a parent, you give of yourself to your children, and it's not ethically correct for it to go to reverse. Right, you give to your children; they're not supposed to give up their lives for you. You're supposed to give to them.
Yeah,
right?
I think that was the point, though. I think it was supposed to be tragic, like that.
So it's like I give you, as a parent, you give of yourself to your child, and you're like, you have this life now; it's a gift. And he's like, no, I don't want it. Take it. The F back is basically the point of the Visitor. And I was like, I don't think I like that. But then at the end of the whole series, Sisko is like, you've given me my life. Well, guess what? I'm going to go off with the prophets. Have a good time, Jake. See you, kid. and off he goes, and it's like he's taken the ball and ran with it and ran away from his kid. And I get that there's other stuff going on, but I think as a parent, you don't you want to be around your kid? I'm not, and it's not a thing that, lessens the show for me, but it is something where my gears seized up a little bit on that, right? I'm leaving I think Cassidy Yates is pregnant at that point.
Right.
And so he leaves his pregnant wife and his son to go off with the prophets, which there were other things going on. I get it. But for me, and I'll turn it back to you in just a second, but I think that that's what marriage is. And I know that yes, they are married at this point. Is saying, that I place this other person above all things. And if that's what that means, then that means all things. And so I have a hard time with him going into it because he may have never come back. And he said, it might be a minute, it might be a year, who knows? Because remember, time is not linear, in the wormhole. So I have a hard time with it. And it seems to be the opposite in a weird way of the Visitor. I need my dad. And here comes dad. And he's like, F off. Off it goes, and I kind of seized up with it. I was like, what just happened? Tell me I'm wrong, Jen. Straighten me out on this.
He knew that his father, what had happened to his father. And the Visitor, he knew his father was trapped in subspace somewhere. And that's, living with that's a lot harder than knowing he's in the wormhole with the prophets. But I get what you're saying about what you leave behind. I was disappointed that there wasn't a big Jake Ben farewell too after 7 seasons of seeing this wonderful relationship. But also at this point, Jake was a grown man, and the more important goodbye was to Cassidy and their unborn child. And them having that scene where he promises to her that he'll be back, I think was really important, because he had to go. Like this, this was bigger than everyone. The prophets saved him from the fire caves and brought him back and like allowed him this goodbye. You know what I mean? It's a little bit different than The Visitor, I think. But I think that's part of I'm a fan of The Visitor. A big fan. It's one of my favorite episodes. But I also think that that's the point. Is that's why it's so tragic. When Sisko realizes what old Jake is doing, when he finally realized that he's really upset. That's not what he wanted Jake to do. He didn't want that for Jake's life. And Jake doing that was tragic, but it's also what saved him. So I don't know. I think there's something dramatically interesting about that.
Oh, that's fair. Again, it's my job as your friendly interlocutor to offer you some provocations, Jen, to respond to.
I love it. I love the provocations. Keep them coming.
All right. Well then, let's talk about Take Me Out to the Holosuite.
Yes.
So I'm going to offer you a provocation right up front, which is that I don't think I actually watched Deep Space Nine at this point, because I think I was actually in the Navy at this point, and I wasn't in a place where I was watching TV regularly, nor did I have access to one. Mm-hmm. So when I watched Deep Space Nine a couple of years ago, I binged it straight through. And here we are early in season 7. It's in my notes here. Season 7, episode 4. We are right in the middle of the Dominion War. This episode struck me as if they were like putting a musical number in the middle of the beach landing scene in Saving Private Ryan.
I understand that criticism. I do. But I also think, there's downtime in war, right? There's got to be, especially in this kind of war, there's got to be downtime, where they're waiting for their next mission from Starfleet, and fixing up the ships and everything from their last mission. And you got to think there's some kind of downtime in a war that spans a quadrant, But I think that's a pretty fair criticism. And they do it twice, don't they? The seventh season is also Bada Bing Bada Bang, where they save.
Might be.
Yes, although where they save Vic Fontaine.
I was actually thinking of the episode where Sisko and Jake build their little sailing ship.
Yes, Explorers. Right after, I love Explorers.
Which, is a great episode, but it's the timing and the location of it in the series. Because they just come back from the Gamma Quadrant where they had a major battle with the Jem'Hadar, and they're like, oh my God, we better get preparations going right now, And so in my head, I'm thinking this would be like General Eisenhower the day before D-Day being like, I'm going to go sailing. And it's like, what?
That's fair. I also think, but Deep Space Nine was in a different time. Remember, they, binging or like serialized storytelling wasn't common, back then. And I think they were one of the trailblazers in that. And I think it was they kind of did half and half. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're right. But it's like I love we have totally that we have that 30-day montage of them building the ship right in the middle of the episode, right? Or maybe in the first quarter of the episode where they're like, oh, I got to build the ship, getting strong now, doing the whole, I got to do a Philly Rocky reference for you because you're from Philly. But they have the whole montage.
Eye of the Tiger, baby.
Yeah, right there in the middle of the episode. And I was like, what is this? So anyway, we're getting far afield. Let me bring it back.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Tell me why you enjoyed this episode about the logicians versus the nerds.
Well, it's funny because one of the things I really like about this episode is where it's placed in the series. Because it's the 7th season. I like the fact that it's the 7th season. The show's almost over. This season ends with Sisko literally ascending into heaven as a god, basically. But they still make an episode where he makes a huge mistake and he learns from it and he grows from it, and I love that they did that in the context of the final season, because Sisko's 100% completely wrong and is a jerk in this episode. And by the end, not only does he realize it, but then he gives Rom this wonderful, completely honest, no qualifiers apology. for his mistake. And I just love that they did that.
So let me offer a comment on that, which is that when he goes out there to yell at, I think it's Rom, or maybe it's Nog, but yeah, when he's at home.
He yells at a lot of people.
but he like gets really spun up. Like he kicks Nog out, right?
Well, he kicks Rom out.
He kicks Rom out. Yeah,
Rom gets kicked out.
Rom,
man.
that acting, by the way, the actor, Max, he's actually the best baseball player out of all of them.
I read that. He had to bat left-handed so he could look bad.
Yeah. He's actually a better baseball player than all of them. But that is the most spun up Avery Brooks gets
yes.
as Cisco.
Mm-hmm.
The only scene that even matches it isn't really Cisco. It's in Far Beyond the Stars when he has his mental breakdown, and that's not it. That's not Cisco, right? Or in a way. I mean, you know what I'm saying. That is the most like angry and crazed he ever gets is over this baseball game. What the actual heck is going on?
Right. Yeah. And that's actually the personal reason that I really like this episode, because I don't know about you, but I've had someone who brings out the worst in me. I've had that person.
Is it this interview right now?
Solak is. That's why I'm here. All these provocations, man. I'm getting spun up. No, but you know what I mean? Like there's always that person that gets under your, that one person that gets under your skin and brings you down to their level. And I understand how that feels. And I think that's a very human reaction. And I think what I like about this episode is he learns at the end, you can't react with that anger to people like that, who's he just wants to get that rise out of you. And one of my credos, I know this is just an old deodorant commercial from the 80s, but never let him see you sweat.
Oh no, let's go for that, man. I'm all about that. I am all about that.
That is a personal motto of mine, and that's what Cisco learns at the end. That beautiful, wonderful scene at the end when they're all just celebrating at Quark's and laughing and drinking to their manufactured triumph, and not letting Solak see how much he really got to him. And that's what really gets Solak's goat, at the end. Like, ooh, it's that irritation I hear in your voice, and that's how you got to deal with it. I just think it's a lesson that I always need to remind myself of, which is why I like that episode.
So the M5 tells me I have to ask you about a musical number.
Oh, yeah.
That appears in Voyager. Now, the M5 was very careful to say the episode doesn't matter, but it's Someone to Watch Over Me, in particular, the singing between the Doctor and 7 of 9. So please explain why the M5 tells me I'm to talk to you about a singing scene.
Okay. I didn't want to spoil. I didn't know where you were in your rewatch there, so I'm glad the M5 decided not to spoil the whole episode for you.
It's all right, because look, I watch the episodes anyway, Jen, because that's how we roll here at Trek Profiles.
You take one for the team.
I do, and and thank you, sir. May I please have another? So I'm there. Thank you, ma'am. May I please have another?
So this is a very personal scene for me. So you mentioned that I'm a mother. I have 3 beautiful, wonderful kids. I have a 9, 7, and a 5-year-old. And my 5-year-old daughter is hard of hearing, and she wears hearing aids. And when she was younger, we were trying to work on her verbal skills, trying to get her to verbalize. And we were having some problems with that. And so every night I would sing "You Are My Sunshine," and I would sing it over and over again to try to get her to join me, try to get her to sing. And it wasn't working. She wouldn't repeat anything back, but I'd still, I every night or every chance I get, I'd sing "You Are My Sunshine," to try to get her to verbalize. And then one day I had an idea. She knows what Star Trek is. She's not obviously into it. This was when she was really young. I mean, she was like 2 or 3 here. So she wasn't, but she knew it was something that mommy watched, is like mommy's thing. And I said, oh, guess what? Here, let's watch this clip, and I put on the clip of the Doctor and 7, singing "You Are My Sunshine," on my phone. After we sang it at night, I was like, look, they sing it on Star Trek too. And, the very next day, I hear her, playing in the next room, and she's trying to sing "You're My Sunshine."
That's glorious.
Not getting all the words, but sunshine, only sunshine, just a couple words. And then and I'm like, oh my gosh, no, this is wonderful. And then it became a thing. Like, she'd ask me, she'd be like, Mommy, play Star Trek Sunshine, play Star Trek Sunshine. So I would always just have it queued up on my phone. So at any moment we can watch. I don't know what she liked of it, like what caught her attention about the Doctor and Seven singing it. But it was just a really special moment for me that Star Trek helped with that.
Oh, but I think that's why Star Trek is a pop culture phenomenon, because it has so many of these moments which are accessible to people in their own lives, and they see something in the show that really touches them.
Yep.
And they bring it into their own lives. And I think that's one of the reasons the show's been so incredibly successful over 50 years as we record this, of people just identifying with various scenes, various characters, various parts of the show, various situations, various story premises that makes it evergreen. And that's not a story. That's a episode that could have been in the 50s. Right. Or in the 60s, excuse me. That's an episode that could have been in the 60s or the 70s or the 80s or the 90s, or even in the aughts, and it wouldn't have mattered, right? That's what makes Star Trek timeless. And I think it's really beautiful. And I also appreciate the fact that Jerry Ryan does her own singing from time to time.
Yes. She's a talented singer.
I know. When I saw her doing the World War II cabaret singer, because when I do my Voyager...
I love that. That's one of my favorite episodes, too. The Killing Game, right?
When I do my Voyager watch through, I don't do any Wikipedia. I don't do any memory alpha. The only thing I watch or know before I go into the episode is the 2-sentence summary that's on Amazon Prime.
Right.
The Voyager goes into a region of space which is uncharted. Like that's all I know.
Helpful.
Yeah, I don't want to know anything, right? So I watched that episode and I'm sitting there and I'm live tweeting it. Maybe I was on the elliptical and I'm like, oh my God, is that Jerry Ryan singing? Yeah. And by the way, she liked my tweet when I tagged her on Twitter. I was like, fandom achievement unlocked, so felt like a total victory there.
Yeah.
So
I think she blames her good singing on Borg vocal processors or something, but we know it's all Jerry Ryan.
No, it's Jerry. She's a talent and a treasure. And we're glad for having her in Star Trek for sure.
Absolutely.
So let's take a look at TNG for a minute, and let's talk about Loud as a Whisper. So this is the one with Riva, the famous negotiator, where he's called up by the Federation to resolve a dispute. And he has his chorus that speaks for him. And Picard has to manage all of this. And he's working with Troy. And there's a little romance there, I think, in the episode. So tell me about this episode, Jen, and why the M5 has selected it for us to talk about.
Okay, well, I've always been a fan of this episode. But obviously, since, I've had my daughter, it's taken on a new significance to me. It's a death character, which is great, but I love that the point of the episode is him finding his confidence in himself. He says, it's about turning a disadvantage into an advantage. And I think that's just a beautiful sentiment. And I think that's really part of IDIC, is not trying to fix or erase things. It's taking all these different perspectives and with my daughter, being hard of hearing is going to affect everything with how she sees the world and how she relates to the world. But I want her to take her unique perspective and use it, in the way that Riva learns how to. And I love one day when she's a little older and can kind of understand to share this episode with her.
There's also a beautiful subplot with Geordi and his visor and Dr. Pulaski.
Yeah.
Which ties in beautifully to the A story.
It really does. I love the way, because this is one of the things, Geordi is blind, but his visor gives him kind of a unique advantage. You he can see things that other people can't, in a way that other people can't. And that's valuable, differences are valuable. I love the scene between Geordi and Riva, and they kind of on the bridge, and they're kind of, Riva sees his visor, and they kind of celebrate each other's differences, in that moment. And Geordi says something like how, being blind is a part of me, and I like who I am. And it's just such a positive way to look at it. And that's what I want for my daughter.
No, I understand. I think it's especially poignant because, and I'm going on memory here, I could be wrong, but I believe the actor is actually deaf.
He is, yes.
And, that's like an added level on top of it.
Yeah, I think that kind of representation is really important. And why wouldn't you have it would seem like, why wouldn't you have a deaf actor playing that part? But there are plenty of examples of them not casting an actor with a disability. And one of the things I like about Discovery, there's one of the crewmen is using a wheelchair.
Yep.
And I really hope that we see more of him, and learn more about him. And I like that there's there's wheelchairs in the future. Do you know what I'm saying? Like it's not like saying, oh, we can fix all the handicaps, that people might have. It's more like IDIC is about all sorts of differences.
I remembered reading, I'm going on memory again, so I could be wrong here, but I think I remember reading in the novelization of Star Trek VI, Undiscovered Country.
Okay.
You've seen it, yeah?
Yes.
That one of the Klingon characters in the story is missing an arm.
Right.
And he could have had it replaced, but he chose to keep it as a badge of honor. Mm-hmm. That he's missing his arm because he lost it in a battle.
Glorious battle.
Yeah, and he's like, look at me, I lost my arm in a battle. That makes me awesome, And while I think that there's, one of the things about the Klingons in general is that they kind of go all over the place depending on what they want to do in the episode. There's not really a set of what Klingons believe. It's all random based on whatever they want to do in an episode, but
whatever they need.
whatever they need. Sometimes they're total bad guys who are like these mouth breathing idiots, and sometimes they're like these honorable crazy people.
Right.
But I just thought in the novelization that was great.
Yeah.
That here's this guy, he chose to do this thing. But I think that's
it's part of who he is. It's part of his story.
Yeah.
And his perspective and his history adds to everything as to the collective conversation. And
and
that's cool.
You were talking about our mutual Twitter friend Thad earlier,
yes.
And I can't remember if it was before we began recording or not, but I was talking to him about some of my favorite Voyager episodes because he's doing a Star Trek Voyager podcast. And I said,
Delta Flyer, you should listen.
Yeah, Delta Flyer. Yes, everyone should subscribe and listen to Thad and his friend Stuart talk about Voyager. It's fantastic. I was a guest on it, so skip that episode, but listen to all the rest.
I was too. I got to be on Delta Flyer.
I'm sure that was one of the good ones. But
no, it was Cold Fire. And the conversation was fine, but the episode was kind of iffy.
I don't remember which one that was. I don't know the Voyager episode titles. Which one was that?
That's the one where they find the other Ocampa's array, and the guy from Alien Nation tries to get her to explore her mental abilities. And right.
Got it. And he was asking me, and I was saying what I was telling you earlier, which is that, there's some Voyager episodes I thought were just outstanding. And I think that Voyager, particularly in season 1, is probably the second only to TOS, in my opinion, for season 1s. As overall season 1s, I think TOS is the strongest of any Star Trek. And then Voyager is right next, in my opinion. And I don't know if it's a season 1 episode, but one of the episodes in early Voyager that really impressed me was Life Signs, which is the one where the Doctor brings in the Vidian female they restore her via holographics to what she would normally have looked like. And that episode really got me in the feels, because there's someone who's really close to me in my life that has a genetic condition that really dictates a lot of what happens in their life. And when they could imagine what it's like to be free of that, I mean, that's something that, just the stars aligned that was that was something that I was primed to be ready to look at, you know? So I was like, that is amazing. And they're like, oh, that was a good episode. I mean, I don't know if I'd put it at the top. I was like, no, it's in the top, you know?
Yeah, the ones that speak to you just speak to you, you know? That's
yeah. And, you know, that's one of the things I love about doing this podcast, because I have people on like yourself, and you pick these episodes. Like, there's episodes that show up again and again, right? And you've listened to the podcast, you know, there's episodes that come up again and again. And then there's ones where you're like, what? You're picking that one? And it's because it has something in it that speaks to something in you or in your life that really matters. So that's why I have to ask you about Deep Space Nine Bar Association, which is an episode that I fear will never appear on the Trek Profiles podcast ever again. Deep Space Nine, Season 4, Episode 16. Whenever an episode with Quark comes up, I have to, before I turn it over to you, I have to preface this by saying my favorite non-character in Deep Space Nine, and by non-character, I mean there's the regulars, the semi-regulars, and the non-characters, is the amazingly beautiful Impella, played by Kathy Buono, who's in like 30 or 40 episodes and doesn't even get a line until season 7. And she's in this episode, and I'm like, it looks like she's going to talk. No, she doesn't talk. No. Nope. You know? Like, what is actually happening here? Tell me what's going on. Why is this episode on this list?
The first aspect of this that I really like is it really gets to an issue that is definitely more of a present day issue than you would think a 21st century issue, you know? But the idea of the workers needing a union is something that's incredibly timely. The part at the beginning, it's played for laughs when Rom pours the ear medicine into his ear, and it's really funny. It's really comical. It makes a great gif. You know, it's really funny. But the idea of workers having to work through things like that, through being sick because they can't afford to take time off, to miss work. They don't have, sick days or paid time off, when they have to struggle through it when they're sick like that. It's just something that's really is like a personally uncomfortable to see, and I like that they went there, first of all. But then they do it in a really, anything the Frankies do is going to turn that into a comical thing eventually. But it really is an issue that really speaks to me. And kind of the other thing about that is Chief O'Brien in this episode. I relate to Chief O'Brien a lot in this episode, because we hear him tell all these stories about his ancestors. In the beginning, they're going into the holosuite, and he's, I'm a direct descendant of, King Brian Baru, and he's got these fabulous stories. And then,
the miners' strike in Allegheny.
Yeah, O'Brien was in the, led the coal miners' strike in 1902. And he's got all these great stories about his ancestors that are probably, not true or exaggerations. And it just personally makes me laugh, because, that's how my family is. I've got all kinds of tall tales too. And in particular, exactly Chief O'Brien's. On one side of my family, my old, Irish grandpa would always say, we're direct descendants of one-eyed King McCormick from County Cork. And you know what I mean? Like, none of it was true. It's probably not even a historical guy. At least Brian Baru is like a historical figure. And then, on the other side of my family, my ancestors really were in the Pennsylvania coal mining strike of 1902. But it wasn't in Western Pennsylvania; it was in Eastern Pennsylvania. But they got that wrong. But
that's it. I can't even watch it. It's totally unwatchable now.
It's totally unwatchable now. But yes. But so just Chief O'Brien, this episode just makes me laugh, because I my family is, and then of course him and Worf, which brings it back to the first part that we were talking about, is how he they're watching to see who's going to cross the picket line, and when Worf does, they O'Brien stands up for the working men and women, and I think it's a really interesting dynamic that usually isn't the sort of thing that's brought up in Star Trek.
Let's talk about the Void.
Ooh, the Void.
So the Void is Voyager, and this is season 7, episode 15, very close to the end of the series where they're traveling through a very dangerous part of space, and Janeway ends up creating a little mini federation with a ragtag fugitive fleet, BSG reference, to get us through and get them to their objective. So tell me why this is an episode that we should talk about.
I think this showcases one of the best episodes in Trek. I think it shows the power of the idea of the Federation, the power of sticking to your principles, and the value of collaboration and working together. I like it because I don't know if this is one of the episodes that I would have gotten out of. Like at every turn, like, would I have done that? Would I have made the ethical, maintained the ethics of the Starfleet Charter? At every decision that every time she does, it's like, ooh, would I have done that? Would I, and would I have gotten out of this void? And I like that it makes me challenge whether or not I could live up to it the way she did. I would hope so.
Let me ask you a question. So, as someone who came into Voyager with very few preconceived opinions, I'm taking it as I see it. There are some episodes where Janeway will utter the line, or a line very similar to, "This is the Delta Quadrant, the normal rules don't apply." And then the very next episode, she will say something like, "We're Starfleet, we stick to our principles."
Right.
Please reconcile this for me.
No,
because
I agree.
I have to admit, my gears seized up because every other episode, she says one of those two things.
I think she's very perceptive. If you want an in-universe explanation, I think she's actually pretty perceptive about what strategies will, for each scenario, would prevail. Yeah. Honestly, yeah. The out of universe explanation is it's just they do what will move the plot along. But yeah, I mean that's definitely a fair criticism. But I mean, you can't have a one size fits all approach, But when you're in the void, man, this was the way to go. I feel like this is a microcosm for humanity in general. We're all in a void, like just all the only limited resources are the resources we have on Earth. I think what they're going for is just the metaphor of if we would all act like that, you know what I mean? And give to get and, work together and collaborate, maybe we could all survive the void.
I think one of the things that has really enabled, the 21st century in a lot of ways to be a place where there's this explosion of growth around the world is that we've set up rules for anonymous human beings to interact with each other in ways which are predictable. Like, you can walk into a store in a city where you've never been, in a store you've never been, and you know how to act, what to do, and how to be. Whereas 1,000 years ago, if you went to a city that you had never been in, you would be in fear for your life.
Right.
And we've set up these rules, which are not top down, but really bottom up, where I can go to another country even, and I can get by without even speaking the language and not be in fear for my life, which is unprecedented, honestly speaking, in the history, in the entire human endeavor up till this point. And I don't mean like 2019, but I mean like the modern era.
Right.
Because, as there's a famous quote that life was nasty, brutish, and short up until a certain period of time. And I think it's because we have these unspoken rules about how to deal with anonymous humans that are unknown to us, that we've taken a lot of the uncertainty out of life. And that's enabled a whole number of beautiful things. Maybe I'm too much of a Pollyanna. I don't know. What do you think?
No, I don't think you're too much of a Pollyanna. I mean, I think being able to communicate with so many different people in the ways we do, it's kind of a double-edged sword, I guess, though, too. I mean, it obviously has enabled a lot of great innovation and a lot of advances, but then also it kind of amplifies the worse things about humanity too at the same time.
Say more about that.
It gives a voice to a platform to people who might not have had one otherwise to spew hate. So you got to take the good, you got to take the good with the bad. I think overall it's better that we, have all this means of communication. And on a higher level, it's obviously a better thing. On a societal level, it's obviously a better thing. Better way for everyone to corroborate together. But but you gotta wade through some unintended consequences, I guess.
I was listening to an evolutionary anthropologist on a science podcast, and I don't even want to say who it is. He or she was very much of the opinion that human beings are evolutionarily dispositioned to be in bands of 100 to 150 people that they all know. And anything outside of that is not really what we're evolved for. And here in this episode, The Void, we have a situation where Janeway gets together with these people who are not biologically similar, not part of her tribe. And she sets herself up as like the coordinator, sort of the center of the wheel. And they're able to achieve this amazing thing. And it's because of this human sense of trust, which is an incredibly beautiful thing. And I think, in my maybe wrong Star Trek opinion, one of the greatest things about all Star Trek, that they're able to achieve more together than they could separately because of that.
Yeah.
And it goes contrary, I think, to some of the nature of humanity that's built into us. And so 2 + 2 = 5, not 2 + 2 = 4. And I think that's one of the messages of this episode as I saw it. But I'm happy to be disabused of that notion.
Yeah, I mean, that was the point of it. They could do more together than they could. You're pulling resources, you're pulling knowledge, you're pulling people, drawing from all these different pools, and everyone can bring something different to the table. And hey, Janeway kicks out the bad apple too. That's part of it. When you pull the weeds like that too, it's going to be even better. And maybe that is something that's not so bad about giving these people platforms, is that they're kind of self-identifying themselves the way that the guy in this episode self-identifies himself, as a horrible bigot when he sees the passenger on Voyager. So I think we agree on this episode.
Okay, Jen, then I think what we should do is we should move on to another Voyager episode. I noticed that the M5 has selected a lot of Voyager for us, and I'm enjoying that, so I think we should talk about some more of it. And let's talk about Blink of an Eye. So this is the episode where the Voyager comes across a planet which seems to be evolving at a scary, scary rate. So this is Season 6, Episode 12 of Voyager, Blink of an Eye. Tell me why you think this is an amazing episode that we should talk about.
This is quite possibly my favorite episode of all of Star Trek.
Whoa.
That's a bold statement.
A lot. That's a bold statement.
All right. So I think it's one of the best because I think it has everything that you could want in a Star Trek episode. It's got a really high concept premise that is really interesting. That's really cool that their time is a different rate than ours. That's really interesting. But I also love it because it's got a really beautiful, intimate character study, and it's just the story about scientific curiosity and discovery and just I just think it's so lovely, and I really love the character of Gaetano Reds. He's possibly my favorite one-off character. I think
really,
yes, I love him. I love that because he kind of represents me. He talks about how, well, first of all, he's got a little bit of a touch of imposter syndrome, which is something I'm sure everybody deals with, but I deal with that a lot. I find that really, really interesting that they went there, that they chose that for him.
Is that one of the reasons that you have talked so much about Janeway during this podcast?
Probably, yeah, because you have to be the best to get that level of respect from everyone. Not everyone. Like I talk about these bad apples. Like we're talking, 90% of the people you work with are going to be fine, normal people and treat you normally. Like it's like the fans. Like a lot of times you'd say, "Oh, I'm a Star Trek fan," and they'd be like, "Oh yeah, you're a Star Trek fan. Prove it. Name all the." All the ships, or name whatever, like prove it.
Name the prefix code from the Reliance command console.
right,
which is 16309, by the way.
Yeah, and that's something that, and I used to respond to that by like knowing all my facts, knowing everything, and having to prove to them. And now, now I'm old enough. I'd say I have nothing to prove to you. Go pound sand, now I'm old enough. I that's would be my reaction. But when I was younger, yeah, it was always
eat a bag of Jumja sticks.
Okay, I have to, right. Yeah, exactly. No, Jumja sticks are probably delicious.
No, they look awful. No, they look they look like something that should be in the Saw movies. Those do not look like anything that anybody should eat. They might taste, orgasmic, but they look horrible.
They're like tree sap. That's probably nice and tasty, like a maple, sugar candy.
They look horrifying to me.
Eat some yammic sauce or something. But you know what I mean? So I used to respond to that differently than I would now. But yeah. So I think Janeway was kind of the embodiment of that for me, just because of what time came out in my stage of life and everything. And Katana Ren's here, he has that. He's like, I don't know why they picked me. They picked you because you were the best person for the job. Own it. And that's hard. That's always something that's been hard for me. Like taking compliments is hard. And
I was much younger, and I did a thing at work, and someone said that was amazing, and I said no, it really wasn't. And they said, anytime anybody compliments you, just smile, nod, and say thank you. That's very kind.
Yeah, I've trained myself to do that.
That's like one of the best pieces of work advice I'd ever gotten in my entire career, and I still do that to this day. Whenever anybody says that was a great thing, I'm like, oh, thank you, that's very kind. And it's right. Like this rote thing, but it's like taking a compliment is one of the hardest things that people have to do. Is especially if you suffer from imposter syndrome, which, by the way, I think approximately 100% of people do. It's a really profound idea, which is to not all the time, but every now and then to look around and say, I did this, whatever it is, whether it's whatever small degree of success you've achieved in work or with your family or in your life or even, in a fandom or with the people right around you. And just to say, is it possible that I've earned this? Say, maybe some of that was me. And to appreciate yourself, it's a hard thing. I know it is.
It's a challenge.
Yeah.
And I also, I identify with him too, his level of scientific curiosity. He talks, one of my favorite scenes is with him and Janeway in her ready room. And he's talking about how when he was a child, he had a mural of the sky ship, over his bed. And then he would dream about it. And it's just, I can just so relate to that, the same way that dinosaurs and paleontology or like astrophysics, just like spoke to my innate sense of curiosity that I think is we see throughout all the centuries of this planet, that everybody has. And it's just so lovely. And I love the song that he sings. The child's prayer to Voyager. And the reason I love the song is because it's a direct correlation to Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star, which is one of my favorite songs. I actually sang both these songs to my kids when they were little, the one from Voyager and Twinkle, Twinkle. Because when Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star was written, we didn't know what the stars were made of, and they say, how I wonder what you are. It's the song about this sense of wonder and wanting to know. And the song that he sings is just so beautiful, and really speaks to that same sense of scientific curiosity. I just love it.
I don't know how you feel about this, but one of these days I'm going to be in a tremendous amount of trouble
Okay.
When my son, Whopper Jr., discovers that most of the things I've said to him throughout his childhood have been things I've stolen from Star Trek.
I do that too.
In particular, like one of my favorite sayings, even though it's not from one of my favorite films, is what you wanted is irrelevant. What you've chosen is at hand. I say that all the time. Why did you do this? I only wanted, what you wanted is irrelevant. What you've chosen is at hand, and now you will accept the consequences. I actually put a thing, I think, on Twitter once of like all the things I said to my kid that came from Star Trek. And it was about like 40 or 50. It was like 40 or 50 lines. It was like big tweet storm, of all like stuff I've stolen. It's like, if he ever finds this, I'm sunk.
Well, maybe he'll become a Star Trek fan. And then when he sees these episodes, he'll be like, no way.
Oh, yeah.
Dad, all your wisdom is from Star Trek.
And I was like, this is my gift to you, son. This is my gift to you. But this thing is timeless. People have been paying attention to this for longer than I've been alive. So, get up in it, right? Well, then I want to ask you about an episode that seems to me to be very similar, which is Muse. Because in this case, the Voyager seems to have an impact upon a civilization that's very similar to Blink of an Eye. Tell me why this is an episode that the M5 says we should talk about.
I like this episode for a different reason. I feel like this episode kind of speaks to my philosophy on what Star Trek, what the purpose of Star Trek is.
What is the purpose of Star Trek?
Oh,
you can't go on now. You have to explain that.
Well,
flag on the play.
I will explain it. But I purposefully wanted to bring this up to you because I frequently hear you on this podcast talk about how in order to be a Star Trek fan, you have to be optimistic about the future. And I find that interesting because I'm not optimistic about humanity's future. I love that there's differences there. But this episode kind of helps me explain why I don't think that's necessary. In this episode, the stories of B'Elanna Torres and Voyager doesn't impact the future. It impacts their present. They're hoping to tell a tale so profound that it'll stop this leader from starting a war, and that's the power of stories. I think it's not as much about the future as about what we can change now in the present to make today better, and that's what I think this episode's about. He's the really flowery thing he says at the end, and Voyager will continue on her journey to the gleaming cities of Earth, where peace reigns and hatred has no home. And I love that line because it's a wonderful thing to strive for. But right now, what's the most useful is for them to take that and use it to make their present better. You know what I mean?
I'm not sure I know what you mean. I remember when I was in high school and I was in world history class, and this might have been 10th grade. I was in world history. I don't remember. It might have been 10th or 11th. No, 11th history. 11th grade was American history. 10th grade was world history. And I remember learning about the Pax Romana and the teacher saying, well, this was a period of unprecedented peace where for like 200 years, there weren't any of these wars. And, and I kept thinking to myself, did the people in that time period think, well, this is it? We're in the Pax Romana, like right now, like let's like kick back and enjoy it.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah, mission accomplished. And I think they probably didn't, right. And even though I was, really young at the time, I just kept thinking, like, I thought the whole idea that us labeling this thing in prehistory as a bad time or as a great time, I bet the people who lived there probably wouldn't have agreed with you. And if you could go back in time, they're probably like, this is hell, I mean, you walk down the street, you're liable to be killed by some random dude, it's horrible. And I struggle, honestly, I do, with this, my sense of optimism versus pessimism.
Right.
Because I do believe that if any of your ancestors or my ancestors or anybody's ancestors could look at the totally objective situations of where we're living right now today, they'd be amazed.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, someone who's very close to me would be dead if they didn't have the medical stuff that they have now.
Oh, yeah.
To keep them alive. Things like infant mortality is at an all-time low. But I don't think it's in humanity. I don't think it's in humans to look on the bright side. I think that that's a very rare thing, and I don't think that people are good at it. And I think that one of the things that is on humanity's side is that we're always looking for danger. And I think that's a good thing. And I think that that's beneficial because it's served us well for a long period of time. But I think that there's a lot of data somehow contrary to that. And people want to beat me up about it, they can. And I'm happy to post on Twitter about it if people want to. But I think that there are some good things that are happening over the long trend of human history. And I'm talking on the realm of hundreds and thousands of years, not over, the last 6 months or the last 5 years. But I think that things are getting better, not worse, over the long term, not the short term.
Yeah, I disagree with that, but if you're saying the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice, it's
an MLK quote.
Which that may be true, but that has to outpace the ways that we are finding to kill ourselves and, hatred and ways to destroy the earth that seem to be growing exponentially. And if you look at the two curves, it doesn't look like that curve of things getting better is going to outpace the bad stuff, the real bad stuff. I mean, the various ways that we could destroy the earth and humanity. You know what I mean?
Well, it's true. I mean, I'm always, very careful about this stuff because, it's like saying, well, I lived yesterday, so therefore I'll live today, therefore I'll live tomorrow.
Right.
That's true up until the point where it isn't, right?
Right.
You got to be careful about that. But
statistics are good and bad too, because you can kind of make statistics say what you want to say. Because like if you say that infant mortality is low, that may be true, but that statistic is masking that infant mortality for, say, African Americans is way higher than other groups, and things like that.
Yeah, I'm talking about global statistics,
right?
Globally,
And so I think global statistics are. I mean, I could see as being useful, but it also masks a lot of the things that aren't so good.
There are problems.
I totally agree with you that we're making innovations every day that make today better than yesterday, in long term. That's absolutely true. And maybe someday we will solve the problem of scarcity, because I think solving the problem of scarcity is more than anything is what would bring about a Star Trek type scenario, of the future. But I just think, for me, I've never seen Star Trek as futurism. I've seen it more as morality plays, almost, that I could use to make myself a better person today. And you know what I mean?
I'd agree completely with that.
So I think it's nice to hope for a future like Star Trek, but the more useful thing is to try to make today better.
I completely agree with that. But I want to, you said something that I want to focus on for a second, and maybe take us in a different direction here, which is that you talked about the fact that Star Trek is morality plays. And I would completely agree that that's the Star Trek that I love.
Yeah.
When we talked earlier about the Apple versus Return of the Archons, right? We look at these two situations from different perspectives and we take lessons from it. I feel like that's something that Discovery has not done well. Really look at morality plays and really give us a deep dive into these philosophical issues. And it's something that I feel like I've been missing from Star Trek in the more recent incarnation that we have in Discovery. Happy to be disabused of that notion. I'm curious what you think. That's not a criticism of the show to say, it's a bad show, but it's just not been the Star Trek that I prefer, because I really like this philosophical examination of things. And I feel like that hasn't really been what they've chosen to focus on. What do you think?
I can agree with that. I enjoy Discovery. I do. It's not my favorite either, but I do enjoy it. It's more trying to teach by identity. And by identity, I don't mean more representation, although it is excelling in that area. It really excels in the area of representation. But teaching by identity is more like putting moral characters and immoral characters in situations to see how they react as a contrast to, you know what I mean? Instead of like, here's our group of heroes. Let's see what they do in this situation and what we can take from that. So it's like, we're going to put, you know, this empress from another dimension, you know, together with, you know, these Captain Pike, who's like the epitome of, you know, everything Starfleet stands for.
All that is moral and good.
Yes. And put all these different identities together and in just bizarre situations to try to eke out how they all differ. You know what I mean? Do you know what I'm trying to say? Like it's the characters that bring the morality versus the situations that they're in a lot of times, I think. And I prefer some of the other tracks, you know, but I enjoy Discovery. And I'm hoping too, maybe they can settle down in the 33rd century or whatever and maybe do some of that.
And
that
take
sort
a breath.
Of thing, and take a breath and find an anomaly, you know, and have a first contact and, you know, do things that way would be cool too with the characters that, you know, I love the characters on Discovery. I think they're amazing. So yeah, maybe we can see more of that. That would be my hope for season 3.
The scenes I miss are the scenes where the captain and all the officers are sitting around in the briefing room for like an 8-minute scene where they're talking about, what does this mean? What should we do? And they're going around the table and everybody's kind of having their opinion. Discovery, man, they have to whipsaw to the next thing within like 3.2 seconds. So they will not have 5 seconds that goes by without a gag or joke or a clever quip and then move on to the next thing. And so I feel like I haven't caught my breath through 2 seasons. So, but that's why I think it's... Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a similar criticism about Discovery too, is I think they come to solutions too quickly. Like, because I like that too. I like, especially with all the scientific stuff and the engineering stuff. They basically have this really hard scientific problem, and they just like, oh, let me whip this up on my computer and, you know, have a little back and forth, a couple lines, and we're good. You know,
Verteron particles through the deflector dish is the answers to everything, as far as I'm concerned. All right, so I want to talk about an episode in a series we have not talked about as of yet.
Ooh.
I want to move on to Enterprise, the only Enterprise episode on the list, and not just any Enterprise episode, but the penultimate episode before the series finale, Terra Prime, with the amazing Peter Weller, also playing another baddie in the Star Trek universe, Paxton. This episode, of course, written by the Stevenses, one of the very notable Star Trek authors or Star Trek collaborators, an amazing group of, I think they're husband and wife, an amazing team that have written some amazing novels and some wonderful episodes for us. So this is the episode where the NX-01 Enterprise discovers that there's this separatist, sort of anti-alienist movement going on among Earth, and they want all the non-humans out of the Earth system, otherwise they will unleash some violence. So please tell me why this episode's on the list.
Well, this kind of goes along with what we were just talking about, because this episode is so 100% what would happen if Earth gets into this situation, you know, where we discover all these worlds and all these aliens on all these planets and they come here. There would 100% be a Terra Prime organization talking about what Paxton talks about, you know, the genetic purity junk, you know, Earth for Earthlings, you know, kind of group. That's 100% what would happen, and it's those kind of things that make me not so optimistic. No matter how many people are not like that, there's always going to be that group of people who tries to ruin it for everybody by being horrible, you know.
So we get Peter Weller, who's doing this incredible dramatic presentation as this like insane sort of speciesist in Star Trek, right? And he's like, no, we don't want any of those aliens here, you know. And it's really amazing to me that the actor was, you know, he was game for it, you know, and all props to him, you know, because you need actors to do the parts.
Yeah.
But certainly, I think as this episode came out, it was what, 2004, 2005?
2005, yeah.
Something like that, yeah. It really was something timeless, right? And that you get these characters and their main goal, whether it's on a species level or on a race level or even a class level, you know, depending upon the time period, where they're just like, anybody who's not like me, quote unquote, you know, we don't want them.
Yep.
And it was a great lesson of Star Trek, right? Is that we're actually better together, you know,
exactly.
when we work together. So I think it's an episode that certainly had a very positive message.
And Trip talks to the one, the one guard, the Terra Prime guard, and he's like, have you ever even met a Vulcan? No, he hadn't. It's just based in ignorance and fear. Just like today's, horrible hate is based in. And it's just, man, people can always find something to hate people for, you know? Not obviously not everyone, just that there's always that certain percentage, and you have to no matter what kind of advancement you want to make, you have to bring people kicking and screaming along with you to make any sort of progress in any area, you know. And I just and then that episode is just so well done, and the whole Trip into Paul and baby Elizabeth thing is
that was hard to watch.
Like so hard to watch and so heartbreaking, and it's a beautiful moment, you know, when T'Pol puts her mother's Idic over baby Elizabeth's crib, and the fact that she names the baby Elizabeth after Trip's sister. T'Pol makes that decision, and it's so lovely, and it's but yeah, it's that episode does everything too. You know, it's got action, you know, it's got the sad subplot, and it's just, I never get sick of watching that episode.
Yeah, I think it's one of the episodes too that I think can change depending on your reaction to it. Can change depending upon where you are in your life. You know, and the episode I always bring up as an example of this is The Offspring, which from TNG, which I watched
now.
Yeah, when it was originally on, I was like, yeah, whatevs. You know, that was sad. Whatever. You know, hey, you know, let me call up my friends. Hey, we going out tonight? You know, and now it's a very different reaction. Yes. You know, being a husband and a dad, it has a very different. It lands very differently with me.
Yeah, I think that's the episode that's changed the most for me too since I've become a parent. Yeah, I bawl like a baby now. I'm not that it wasn't sad before. You know, it's not that, you know what I mean? Like, it's not that non-parents can't appreciate it. It's just for whatever reason, like you just always, you know, when you put yourself in the position now, you know, with your children.
Well, I talked about it, I think I haven't talked about this in a while, so I feel like I can mention it again, which is that, you know, I talked about in some earlier Trek Profiles episodes about Timothy Leary, and he would always talk about set and setting, right? Which is that the things are within you when you have an experience, and the people, you know, the environment that you're in when you have an experience. You know, it's those two things together that affect how you interpret the experience, right? And in his case, he was talking about psychotropic drugs. But I think the same thing is true for Star Trek, right? Which is that the point that you
Star Trek is a drug.
It is. It's mind altering.
It is mind altering. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
a natural high.
Well, no. I mean, I'm thinking about the episode I did with Janae Fowler, episode 20. She grows up in this religious cult. Mm-hmm. And she watches Star Trek, and it changes her perception of the world that she's in and how she should think about things. That is literally the definition of mind altering, right?
It is.
And now she's apostate, and her own family won't talk to her, and she's isolated from all the people that she grew up with because she has a different perspective on things. You know, it's very sad. But I think that that's true about a lot of Star Trek, right? Which is that the point of view we have on these episodes changes over time based on where we are in our lives and also what's going on around us, you know? So you look at an episode like Terra Prime, and maybe in 2005, you had a different reaction to it, and you watch it today and you think, oh my God, you know, this was prescient. It's amazing. Right. You know, and you have a different reaction to it. I think that that's okay. But my question for you, Jen, is it as we sit here in 2019 and we have 700 and something hours of Star Trek that you've consumed, you have spent a considerable portion of your personal free time in watching Star Trek, thinking about Star Trek, talking about Star Trek. Why are you spending all of this time in your life on Star Trek? Don't you have other things to do?
Oh, no, I don't. Thanks for bringing it up. No. Oh, man. Well, I mean, just what we're talking about, it's mind altering. No, I mean, I love it so much. You know, you want to talk and do things about things you love. And I love Star Trek for many reasons, but Star Trek, you know, it influences pretty much everything I do, you know, because it's kind of like the lens through which I see the world, because it's who I inspire to be, you know. I inspire towards this beautiful idea of how humanity can be, and I try to live my life in that way. And sometimes I'm successful, and sometimes I'm not. But either way, you know, it's there to guide me and to comfort me, and you know, in times when I might fall short, and I love it.
I can't think of a better point to move into the final portion of this podcast, Jen.
Okay.
Because the M5 is frantically signaling me that it's time for the Kobayashi Maru.
Oh no.
The Kobayashi Maru. The Kobayashi Maru is a cunning test prepared by the M5. Should you not only survive the test, but pass it as well, the M5 will award you an honorary Star Trek title. Are you ready, Jen?
I'm ready as I'll ever be. Let's do it.
M5, load the Kobayashi Maru simulator and prepare to record Jen's responses.
Simulation ready.
Time for a coffee in Voyager's mess. Only 2 coffee blends are on offer. Landrus Blend or Tom Paris Delight. What's your choice?
Tom Paris Delight.
Welcome to Starfleet, Cadet Jen. Choose your first assignment. Starbase Yorktown or Deep Space Station K7.
Oh, Yorktown.
Select your next elective at Starfleet Academy. Take a class on starship piloting from Sulu or learn warp theory from Scotty.
Warp theory, Scotty!
Which would be worse? Captured by the Orion Syndicate or being a prisoner of the Packlids?
Oh. Ooh, Packlids.
Who do you want to hang with? The Chandra from Move Along Home or Dr. Severin from The Way to Eden?
Move Along Home.
You'd rather hang with the Chandra from Move Along Home?
Absolutely.
But Dr. Severin, we reach.
No. Oh no, that might
Don't be a Herbert.
That might be a controversial pick.
Don't be a Herbert. You gotta pick Dr. Severin.
No. Nope, I'm sticking by. We can talk about the Packlids versus the Orion, because
tell me why would you pick that?
Because they're both torturous for very different reasons, you know. I don't know. I don't even know that I made the right decision. If you ask me again, I might pick the Orions.
There are no right decisions in the Kobayashi Maru.
There aren't.
There are no right decisions. They're all terrible choices. That's the whole point. Well, then let's see what the M5 has to say. Simulation complete. M5, please compute the results and tell us if our guest has passed the Kobayashi Maru.
Analyzing.
Jen, I am pleased to tell you that the M5 has calculated that you have passed the Kobayashi Maru simulation. Congratulations, my friend.
Phew!
You were worried, were you?
So worried, man.
And now, the M5, who has analyzed your answers, will award you an honorary Star Trek title on behalf of the Trek Profiles podcast. M5, what title shall we award our guest?
Jennifer Tifft is awarded the title of Engineering Manager for Warp Systems Design at the United Federation of Planets Regalia Shipyards.
So, there you go.
Yes, I can handle that. Let's do it.
Jen, please tell people how they can get in touch with you if they want to continue the conversation.
Oh, yes. So I'm on Twitter. It's the best way to get a hold of me, at Ida Quarks. Please do. I love talking Trek, so feel free to reach out. And you can also find SnapTrek at SnapTrek on Twitter. So, yeah, that's the best way to contact me.
Jen, thank you so much for being part of Trek Profiles.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.
Here ends this installment of the Trek Profiles podcast. And before we offer a Trek quote to close this episode, I'd like to remind you, you may send us your kind well wishes, critical comments, or your edgelord Star Trek rants to us at feedback@trekprofiles.com, or on Facebook or Twitter at Trek Profiles. Anything you send us may be used in the show, or it may be tossed into a giant vat of biomimetic gel. This time, I leave you with a quote from Major Kira, who in the episode Bar Association said, quote, "Just get me 2 mugs of synth-ale, a double order of Hasperat, and hold the conversation." Close quote. Thanks for listening, and live long and prosper.
This handcrafted podcast is brought to you by Stars and Sky Media Lab. It's cosmic.
But I think you're right, though, Jen, because you mentioned before we started recording that you're a huge sports fan, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And
you're
that
probably has something to do with this, too.
and that's okay. But, I mean, Philadelphia is a city with a very long and glorious sports history, right? I mean, there's many storied teams from Philadelphia in whatever kind of sports you're into, right? There's all the sports there. Yep. It's got a long history.
It's ingrained in the city's DNA.
Exactly.
And their sports teams.
I was trying to, and I'm in Las Vegas, as I've mentioned on the show before, and I was trying to explain to someone exactly what the Golden Knights mean to the city. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to explain to my cousin, who is from another kind of city, he's from LA, and he was all about the LA Kings, and he's like, it's just hockey. And I was like, no, it is not. And I was explaining to him about, we had those October 1 shootings here in Vegas, very tragic.
Yes.
The Golden Knights started playing immediately after that. We were told for the longest time that, first of all, Vegas isn't even a real city. It's not real. No one actually lives there. No one would actually care about sports. Like, anyone who lives there is either a degenerate gambler or someone who cleans hotel rooms. True. That's a true thing. Because I travel for my day job, and when I am in the airport and people find out I live here, they start asking me questions about gambling. And I was like, I don't know. I don't gamble. I have no idea. I don't know.
Right.
If you're showing 7 and the dealer's showing 85, you should, only on Tuesdays play the Red Queen from Fizbin. I have no idea. So,
the Strip's just one little part of Vegas.
Yeah, but people don't understand that. But I was trying to explain that it really was something that brought the city together in a way that nothing else, and I've been living here since the 90s, nothing else ever has. And we were just going through, 2 amazing years of the Golden Knights, and there were nights where I had to go to work the next day. I couldn't watch the game on TV.
Oh, blacked out.
No, we don't have blackouts. Oh. It's that I knew whichever way the game went, I would be so spun up, I wouldn't even sleep. I wouldn't even sleep. I knew I would be up all night. I'd be up till 3 a.m, and I get up at 4.
Get your heart racing, yeah.
And even if it was like an East Coast game that began at 4 and ended at 7, I'd just be sitting there going, oh man, how did he not get that goal? How did he not get that goal? And I would just be losing my mind about it. And so I completely understood Cisco losing his mind over this baseball game, which doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter at all, yeah.
Doesn't matter. The Jem'Hadar are still coming to kill all of you. And he's
get back to the war, guys.
Yeah, he's wrapped around the axle about, what's going on here. So I respected that tremendously. And I really appreciated Avery, how he brought it for that scene.
Yeah, I mean, and in that vein, I like the little touches they had about what he actually does appreciate about the game. This is what I love about baseball. You never know what's going to happen, when Nog couldn't figure out who to tag and, that sort of thing. And when he finally clicked and he put Rom in pitch hitting, Rom, and he brings back the crowd. Because that's what it is, that's what gets you fired up is those moments in sports and having the crowd going wild and Rom accidental bunt, but still bunt, still got to run, and it's such a wonderful moment.
So I'm going to make a promise right here on the Trek Profiles podcast, Jen. If you ever get out to Vegas, either yourself or with your family, and it's hockey season, I'm going to take you to a game at T-Mobile.
Oh, I am taking you up on that. I'd love that.
And we'll see the Golden Knights.
I love hockey.
I've been to a lot of sporting events in a lot of cities, and I will tell you there is nothing like hockey here in Vegas. Because the one thing I'll say is, like, if you're forget whatever team or whatever city you're from, but if you're putting on any kind of entertainment on the Las Vegas Strip, you have a lot of competition.
Yeah.
And so if you're putting on a sports event, you got to compete against all the Cirque du Soleil shows. You got to compete against, Celine Dion. You got to compete against it. So yeah, they seriously bring it, and it is cray, and it's definitely an experience. Funny. So that'll be my thank you to you for coming on the show and subjecting yourself to this nonsense for a couple hours. Man,
same deal. If you ever come to Philly, I'll take you to a Flyers game. You can. We got some craziness too. We've got the home of Gritty.
I know. I love Gritty. I think he's great.
About the Flyers, but
I'm going to put
it's a time.
I'm going to put a link up to Gritty in the show notes. So even if you don't know anything about baseball or what Gritty is, it is definitely worth checking out because it is the most bizarre mascot you have ever seen, and it's the kind of thing you look at and you're like, why is that existing?
Gritty
I don't know. I don't understand.
Yeah, he's awesome.
It's really wild. All right. I may cut this part out, so let me ask.
Okay.
We've been going for over 2 hours. I think I want to talk about Terra Prime.
Yes. Yeah, now's a good time to talk about Terra Prime.
But we haven't talked about Blink of an Eye or Muse. Do you really want to talk about either of those two? Because we can if you want. I just want to be respectful of your time.
If you're okay, I'd like to talk about them. If you have enough time.
My time is your time.
Okay.
I am the host. You are the guest. It would be unceremonious of me to not talk about them. So
you can always cut if the episode runs too long. You can always cut out whichever conversations aren't interesting. I
am the dictator and despot of the Trek Profiles podcast. So there is no such thing as too long.
Okay.
When it comes to podcast, I mean, perfectly honest. The thing about podcasts is just press pause. So I don't have an idea about too long. The one I did with John Champion was damn near close to 3 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, the released one I think was like 2.5.
Okay.
So I have no problem with that. So let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right. So I think what I want to do is I want to talk about Blink of an Eye and then Muse and then Terra Prime. Is that okay? Or
yeah. Nope, that's fine.
But I want to do Terra Prime last if that's okay.
Oh, sure.
All right. You did great.
Oh, thank you.
How is that for you?
Oh no, I just feel like I just yak and
that's what a podcast is. You yak.
I know. It's funny. It's so when you're talking about something you love so much and you have so much you want to say, like you're in your brain at once, and then it all tries to come out your mouth at the same time. And I probably did do a little bit of rambling, but
no,
I
okay.
apologize for that. But yeah, that was a lot of fun.
You didn't do the worst thing you could do on the Trek Profiles podcast.
Ooh, what's that? What's the ultimate?
Why do you love this episode? Because it's awesome.
Oh.
It's really great.
It's awesome, man.
Why is it personally?
You gotta back it up.
Why is it meaningful to you? Because it's just so great. It's like that. That's when I start taking out the long knife, and I'm like,
oh man. Well, then you do a really good job of editing because I've never heard, like none of the episodes I've ever seen like people do that. Like you managed to drag it out of them somehow.
I don't know. It might be in my own head. I don't know.
No.
Maybe
you're just like, I want more. Give me more.
Yeah. Well, it is true because I will say the experience of recording them is never quite the same as the experience of listening to them.
Yeah.
I mean, just to give you a stupid example, did you happen to see that Let's Make a Deal episode I was on?
Yes.
I mean, the day I was there, I mean, it just,
in your full,
my full makeup. I had my whole head done. And, I get up there and, Wayne Brady is like pointing at me and I'm like looking around like, who's he pointing to? And, me,
me.
And you get up there and like the whole thing is like a giant flash and you don't even know what's going on. Right. And I couldn't even understand half of what he was saying. And and then I'm watching it on TV for the first time and I'm like, so that's what happened. It's
right.
it's a very different thing. You know, that's just a little example, but the podcast is the same thing.
No, yeah. I totally agree.
when you hear them, it's a very different thing.
Yeah, it's usually like, it's like, I think I really flubbed that. And then I listen to it, I'm like, oh, that's okay. It's not as bad as I thought it
was. There were some of these that I've done where I've recorded them and I'm like, that was a dumpster fire, you know? And I was like, I'm gonna nuke the podcast from orbit. It's the only way to be sure, you know? And it's a nice little Ripley Aliens reference right there. But then I listened to it, I'm like, it wasn't quite the dumpster fire I had anticipated, you know?
You can salvage something from
hopefully
you can salvage something from today.
Is there anything we didn't talk about that you feel like you want to talk about?
Let's see. I mean, boy, we covered a lot.
We covered a lot of episodes.
We covered a lot of stuff. I think we got it. I was, because we talked. I was going to talk more about parenting, but it just didn't come up. Like,
we talked a lot about that.
I know, but we talked about like specific to like, the challenges of my daughter. You know what I mean? Versus like general. I guess we did. We talked about the offspring and everything, but my coping strategies, my Star Trek coping strategies for parenting, which involves pretending I'm a Section 31 agent, but a non-nefarious Section 31 agent.
It's like a gentler, kinder Section 31 agent,
right? Well, because I just feel that parenting is just a whole bunch of thankless jobs.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah. and when it gets to be too much, it makes me, it calms me down to pretend that I'm like this is just my job. This is just my assignment as a Section 31 agent. I have to do this thankless job. And, it's just a very helpful strategy for me.
No, I got to admit, I'm in awe because I didn't know you had 3 kids.
Yeah, I've got 3. And I think the best part was the disagreements, like the challenge, not disagreements. I think the best part was the challenges when you challenged the way I thought about the episodes. I love that. That's awesome.
Well, what was really funny, this is actually cool, was I won an award at work, and the lady.
Congratulations!
Thank you. This is like a year and a half ago, and the lady who was in charge of all the, special events,
right? She
sends me an email saying, well, because you won this thing, you get to pick a prize from this list of like 4 things. And you can pick, like, for men, they have this gender thing going on. So like for men, you can pick one of these 4 things. And one of them was like these like $200 cufflinks with like diamonds in them, Wow. And I was like, I actually wear French cuffs, but I was like, I don't actually want to wear any of that. I was like, I'd really like a pair of Star Trek cufflinks. And they're like $30 at StarTrek.com. And she's like, really?
I'd be saving you a lot of money here.
And I was like, that'd be awesome. And so they went and they actually bought me these Star Trek cufflinks. Yeah, they did. So I have them and I wear them every once in a while. And I'm like, look at these Star Trek cufflinks, baby. Yeah. And they make me so happy, like beyond all reason,
Yeah.
So that's it. I'm now at that age where I'm like, I'm out and proud. This is what I do.
Yeah.
The thing that drives me crazy, though, I will admit, is, having worked in an actual engine room on a ship.
Yeah.
I get really wrapped around the axle when they just take like these crazy liberties in Star Trek with stuff. And they're like, yeah, connect this system to that system. And I'm like, whoa. Like that, no. I don't even know what system A is and system B is, but like, if you're just like making up stuff like that, you're like, I thought about it for half a second and that could work. No, it could not work. Don't do that,
Oh yeah. Those kind of things make me laugh too. Yeah.
They make me spit up in my head and I keep thinking that's danger, Will Robinson. Don't do that.
Yeah. And they have no procedures for anything. And
no checklist.
No checklist. Yeah. And it just makes me laugh because I was like, this wouldn't pass inspection like today in the 21st century, let alone, in the 24th century. What are you doing?
Which, I don't know if you saw the 2003 Battlestar Galactica remake.
Yeah. Yes, I did.
But they had even though they didn't really focus on it, they had a very strong sense of how ships actually work. And, they really had some people who were in the writer's room who just kind of knew how things actually happen, and like even the words that they would say, it
was just better technical.
Yeah, it was just better. They're like, spin up FTL drives 1, 2, and 5 and leave 3, 4, and 6 in standby, and like they would know the right numbers.
Right.
Like why they would have like 2 odds and an even. Like that's a thing that only someone who had been there would know that.
Right.
And it's just like I just used to get so thrilled out of that. Yeah. But I admit it was totally fangasming.
Right.
What one point when Laura Roslin comes aboard the Battlestar and Galactica, and you hear over the announcement they say 12 colonies of Kobol arriving, and I was like, oh my god, did they really say that? That's a real thing. It's just I could totally geek on that stuff for forever and a day.
Yeah. Well, and that's one of the problems I have with Discovery is they don't seem to focus on those kinds of accuracies. Like they have we haven't seen the chief engineer yet. Now, look, we have Jet Reno now. She's awesome. But who's been running the warp drive on the Discovery for these 2 years? We don't know. And then they're rigging up all these gadgets. They're bringing someone from the future and trapping them in a thing. And who do they have engineering this thing? But they're fungal mycology, they're fungal biology expert or whatever.
This
you're not even an engineer, dude. It's not even that you're just the wrong kind of engineer. You're not even an engineer. I love you, Stamets, but
I waved off on this during our interview because I didn't want to get into it. But it's something that really kind of bugs me. Is that I feel like remember how you were talking about how when you were a teen and you were really a big fan you wanted to be a big fan of Voyager and of Janeway, and you felt like you had to defend her.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of that with Discovery. Like there's people who are just like, no, Discovery's the most perfect Star Trek that it's ever Star Trek. And if you don't like it, and I'm just like, whoa, calm down, people. Just relax. You know?
I see a lot of that too now, and it's getting worse. But I think the reason is because a lot of times when people say things bad about Discovery, it's not making constructive criticisms. It's usually people who are hating it for ideological reasons and things like that. You know what I mean?
I get you.
And like, look, you could see these people saying things about Discovery. Click on their Twitter feed, and exactly what their political leanings are. You know what I mean? So when you're dealing with people who aren't exactly criticizing in good faith, I could see why people start to get defensive about that. But you're right. I see a lot of defensiveness just anytime. Now it's just like anytime anyone says something about Discovery.
Instant block.
Yeah.
It's like, just chill out, chillax.
Yeah.
Just chillax.
But I see where the origin of that came from, though, because, man, there's some real jerky people out there.
So anyway, it's late, Jen. I'm gonna let you go. So
thanks for spending all this time with me.
No, I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Interesting conversation.
And it was nice to be able to virtually meet you one-on-one. So we've engaged on Twitter many times. So it was a pleasure to actually talk to you. Never demur from sending me good place gifts. That will always be most welcome.
I love the Good Place.
Me too.
I was so excited to see that you're a fan too. I think a lot of Star Trek fans are Good Place fans too.
Well, I'm a fan because in college, the first time I went to 7 different colleges before I graduated. Long story, but in one of those colleges, I read a lot of Greek philosophy.
Okay,
and it is. And the Chidi character, right?
Oh, yeah.
It is very obvious to me that they have a lot of philosophy that's in the show.
Yeah.
And when he's talking about that stuff, I'm like, oh, yeah, I read that. Oh, no, I know what he's talking about. Yeah. Oh, totally. Oh, no. Mill's utilitarianism, totally get it. And so then they go into these, scenarios. They're like, this is the trolley problem. I was like, oh, dude, I wrote 7 papers on the trolley problem. So I totally get it. So I love it.
Yeah.
Plus, it's funny.
Oh, it's so funny. And if the Good Place, the official podcast, Sean is the host. The guy who plays Sean is the host. But if you ever do a rewatch, I would recommend, watching an episode. They do it episode by episode. So I recommend, watching that episode and then listening to the podcast about it. Because they talk, like in a bunch of them, they talk to the philosophy, the experts that they have come in and basically give classes to, to the writers about all these different philosophies that they're talking about in that episode. And it's really interesting to hear from the actual philosophers that they're using, and they give them, like homework assignments and the writers' homework assignments and stuff. So it's really interesting to hear the process.
We could have gone down a whole rabbit hole.
Yeah.
When we were talking about, whether or not the world's getting better.
Oh yeah. We could have talked about that for 2 hours.
Because, there's a famous, in the world of philosophy, there's a famous philosopher named Karl Popper. And he's a recent guy. He's not like in antiquity. And one of his things was about unfalsifiable claims, and so like his whole thing is like, prove that the sun will come up tomorrow is not
right.
something that you can prove, right? You cannot prove that the sun will come up tomorrow. But there's things about trends and how you understand knowledge, and things like that. And like, there's claims that are unfalsifiable, which a lot of people cling to,
mm-hmm.
While you can have a feeling that things aren't getting better, or I feel like it, which is, valid that people can feel that way. It's very difficult when you sit down to actually look at evidence and say, let me amass evidence in a logical way to prove X, Y, or Z. That's very different than the kind of conversations people have on a podcast, or hanging out at the Starbucks,
Right.
And he wrote a lot about just that whole idea of how you can know things and the epistemology of it, and it's stuff that really gets me going, which I think is kind of the same reason I like Star Trek. So